Beyond the edge of reality lies a story of ultimate conquest, a story of war and friendship, a story of a love that can never be, and a hatred that always was. And now, the most anticipated epic adventure of the year will never come to a theater near you. Final Fantasy VII. PlayStation.
Ooh boy, here's hoping this isn't the video that tanks my YouTube career. I was kinda hoping my channel would survive long enough for GTA 6 to come out and for my take on that to be the thing that does me in. So I'll be completely upfront. I don't have the same reverence for Final Fantasy VII that other fans do. The game flew under my radar when it was first released, mostly because I was 7 years old and didn't own a PS1 yet. This isn't the game that got me into RPGs. Breath of Fire 2 holds that honor, which I emulated on my cousin's computer when I was 10 years old. It's not even the game that got me into Final Fantasy. That was FF5, which I also played on my cousin's computer. And it's not my favorite Final Fantasy, or in my opinion, the best in the series. That title goes to Final Fantasy X. And if you look around my channel, you'll see that I built my audience on reviewing Grand Theft Auto, other Rockstar titles, and games similar to GTA, not RPGs. Though my Digimon World 3 review has some decent numbers on it for some reason. So why am I doing this video? No particular reason. This joke and what you're seeing on screen only works if I didn't fumble the ball and this video actually debuted in February of 2024. Honestly, I've just been looking to expand the scope of what I cover and to discuss games in other genres that I really enjoy. If you go back far enough on my channel, you'll see I basically covered a random assortment of games I like playing. I didn't really stick to a particular genre until my GTA 3 video, and most of this year has had me dipping my toes into games that aren't part of my usual content, for better and for worse. Which brings us to today. Admittedly, I wanted my first Final Fantasy game for the channel to be Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, but I didn't list it as an option in the poll I did months ago, and my subscribers chose Final Fantasy VII as the one to cover first. And I'm a man of my word who gives the people what they want. Except for all those other times when I didn't, but we don't talk about that. Should I really experiment with reviewing more RPGs by starting with one of the most critically acclaimed and beloved games of all time? Probably not, but hey, sometimes the best way to learn how to swim is to jump into the deep end of the pool. I didn't play Final Fantasy VII until several years after its release, when I was around 14 in high school. I was aware of the game's popularity and familiar with its characters, thanks to Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, and possibly Advent Children. I honestly can't remember if I saw the movie before or after I played the game. Oh god, I think I did see the movie first.
On your knees. I want you to beg for forgiveness.
But for whatever reason, I just never went out of my way to play Final Fantasy VII. This actually pissed off my friend David when I told him. The next time I saw him in English class, he brought his copy with him and told me I needed to beat it before I gave it back. So I did just that. It took a bit to click, but once it did, I spent all my free time outside of school playing Final Fantasy VII. Then 2 weeks later, I handed the game back to David and confidently said,
Oh my god. I get it.
Final Fantasy VII was excellent and blew me away. Did I dedicate my life to it and start a weird soul-bonding cult where I was a reincarnation of Genova? No. But I understood what its fans were trying to tell me. From its story and characters to its massive world and incredible soundtrack, I finally got why so many sang its praises. Even with most of the game's biggest moments spoiled for me, they still had an impact when I experienced them firsthand. It helped that I didn't know the full context of some of these moments, or when they happened in the game. I was so enamored with the game that I've been using the Final Fantasy VII Victory theme as my ringtone ever since I got my first cell phone. Over 15 years of hearing that theme every time I got a call. And when I bought my first iPod, the Advent Children OST was the first album I put on it. Second was Street Fighter 4, with an equally great soundtrack. So thanks for pushing me to play the game, David. Hope you're doing well wherever you are. Also, hope your name is actually David and I didn't misremember it. This was nearly 20 years ago, so I don't really remember everything or everyone from high school. Man, this video is making me feel old. Despite how much I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII, it's been a while since I last played it, so my memories are a bit fuzzy. If I remember correctly, the last time I did a full playthrough was just before Remake dropped, so maybe around 4 years ago. With Rebirth about to drop, or having already dropped depending on when I release this video, Let's dive into what made this game so popular that it's often credited with helping JRPGs become mainstream in the West. Since Final Fantasy VII is quite different from my usual content, some of you watching might be new and not familiar with my review style. This is less a video essay and more of a long-form review, where I'll go through my recent playthrough of the game from beginning to end. I'll cover its world, gameplay, battle mechanics, and characters while giving a full story synopsis. If you're familiar with bigger YouTubers like Snaker or Salt Factory, that's more or less what my style is like. I'll be trying my best to avoid major changes in story beats from Remake and Rebirth, as well as any other games in the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, like Dirge's Cerberus or Crisis Core. If this video does well, I'd like to follow up with a look at the media and games in the compilation. So, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff the algorithm loves. I'm going to spoil everything about the game's story. While Final Fantasy VII is almost 30 years old, with so many twists common knowledge now, I do understand some viewers might not be familiar with all the details. If you've never played it or have only played Remake, I'd suggest watching until the end of the Midgar section to decide if you want to keep watching or stop, and to experience the game yourself, or avoid spoilers for Rebirth. If you're wondering about the best way to experience the game, there isn't a right or wrong version of Final Fantasy VII. I recommend checking out AustinSV's video comparing the different releases to determine which one is best for you. I'll link his video in the description below. The visuals and intended look of the game vary significantly depending on the version you choose, so it's up to you to decide if that matters or not. The last time I played was on the Switch, but for this playthrough I used the Steam version of Final Fantasy VII, which I modded using the 7th Heaven mod manager. The game runs fine on Steam, but the mod manager makes it easier to use my 360 controller, and allows for a borderless windowed mode, which helps with smoother footage capture. I also installed the Remako HD mod, which cleans up and upscales the pre-rendered backgrounds and FMV cutscenes. While the AI upscaling isn't perfect, sometimes causing background objects to warp or jumbling text, it does a decent job improving the 2D backgrounds to match the quality of the 3D models. The original PlayStation version still holds up well, despite some questionable translation errors. Newer ports have fixed bugs and added optional quality of life features, like turning off random battles, speeding up gameplay, or instantly healing your team. The game isn't overtly tough, but the speed up function is a lifesaver in the slower, drawn-out battles and travel. With all that out of the way, let's mosey. I won't go in depth about Final Fantasy VII's development, but I wanted to briefly discuss a Game Informer interview from January by Brian Shea. In the interview, some of the original Final Fantasy VII team members discuss how the game's chaotic development changed the way the company approached future titles in the franchise. Since it took me a while to get this video out, the original link to the article no longer works because GameSpot shut down Game Informer and reduced its website to a single farewell page. Fortunately, the article was archived and I'll include the link below. According to Tetsuya Nomura, the game's character designer and visual director, Final Fantasy VII marked a turning point for the team, prompting them to adapt their approach to game design. Up until Final Fantasy VI, the games were designed with a certain approach, often incorporating elements added on a whim by different departments. From Final Fantasy VIII onward, the team adopted a more cohesive and calculated approach, involving larger group discussions to evaluate new ideas and ensure they fit the overall vision for the game. Final Fantasy VII combined both design approaches. While it was more planned and cohesive, it still included several elements added on the fly. Departments would make changes to characters that sometimes conflicted with the game's script. This led to a disorganized development process, but Final Fantasy VII's director, Yoshinari Kitase, worked closely with writer Kazushige Nojima to ensure that all changes align with the story. This blend of different design philosophies is reflected in the final product. While this might be a detriment in other games, I'd argue that it's what makes Final Fantasy VII such a unique and memorable experience. Ooh yeah, that's good shit. While I'm still a sucker for Final Fantasy X's opening track, "'Tis Anarchind," I have to admit that I do prefer Final Fantasy VII's opening bombing mission. The first part of the song creates intrigue as we see an unknown flower girl praying before the camera pulls away to reveal her surroundings. The music then becomes more triumphant, perfectly capturing the grandeur of Midgar. As the opening title fades away, the second half of the song intensifies, setting the stage for the first level and the gravity for the mission at hand. I'd love to delve deeper into the music and Nobuo Uematsu's approach to composing the soundtrack, but I'll save that discussion for later in the video. After the title reveal, we catch glimpses of a train before shifting to another part of Midgar as it arrives at its destination. A small group hops off, swiftly taking out the local guards before sneaking into a restricted area. This ragtag bunch is Avalanche, an eco-terrorist group on a mission to protect the planet by taking down the evil megacorporation, the Shinra Electric Power Company, or just Shinra Inc. Shinra powers Midgar and other advanced cities worldwide through the production of Mako energy. This green substance can be refined and condensed into materia, colorful orbs that allow you to use magic. However, despite its benefits, Mako is far from being environmentally friendly. It's created by harvesting and converting energy from the life stream, the spiritual essence of the planet and all living things. Shinra's overproduction of Mako is destroying local ecosystems and, if left unchecked, will eventually lead to the planet's death. Overexposure to Mako is also dangerous to your health. It can poison you, mutate your genetic makeup, or just straight up kill you. With the average person ignorant of Mako's dangers, and Shinra so powerful they effectively rule the world, Avalanche is the planet's last line of defense against complete destruction. Looks like our heroes really have their work cut out for them, especially since their organization is so tiny. Leading the charge is their foul-mouthed leader with a gun for an arm, Barrett Wallace. Next is Biggs, the group's strategist and series recurring Star Wars reference. Then there's Wedge, the information guy, and the series' second recurring Star Wars reference. Next is Jesse, the mechanic and demolitions expert. Finally, we have our main character, the spiky-haired anime boy with a big sword, Cloud Strife. Although he isn't actually part of Avalanche, he's a mercenary they hired to help them with blowing up the Mako reactor in this opening mission. Cloud doesn't share Avalanche's views on saving the planet. For him, it's all about a payday. In fact, he used to work for Shinra, specifically as part of their elite group of super soldiers known as Soldier, all in capital letters. While he's initially introduced as an uncaring and arrogant show-off, Cloud is actually softer and more caring than he lets on. He just struggles with opening up to others, for a myriad of reasons I can't delve into just yet. I'll be honest, the first time I played Final Fantasy VII, Cloud's personality took me by complete surprise. As I mentioned in the intro, I was familiar with the game's cast from other games like Kingdom Hearts or the Advent Children movie, which gave me the wrong impression of Cloud. These portrayals completely mischaracterized him. I expected him to remain cold and brooding throughout the entire game, but I wasn't expecting him to snark, get into awkward situations, or occasionally act like a dork. There's a lot more I want to say about Cloud's character, how he changes throughout the game, and how other media ruined his image for a while, but I gotta save that for way later in the video. Before we dive into the plot about stopping capitalism, or big oil, or whatever, let's take a moment to talk about the graphics. Every time I see little low-poly Cloud running around a pre-rendered world, I can't help but wonder why Square Enix hasn't announced a Final Fantasy VII Lego set yet, because that idea just prints money. Thinking back on it, it's easy to forget just how difficult the transition from 2D to 3D gaming was during the 5th generation of consoles. It wasn't just about keeping characters and worlds looking good, it was also about making sure the gameplay worked in 3D, a hurdle that many franchises struggle to overcome. But Square knocked it out of the park. Initially, Final Fantasy VII was planned as another 2D game for the Super Nintendo, but work on it was interrupted when several of its designers were pulled away to help with Chrono Trigger, which is my personal favorite game of all time. According to Yoshinori Kitase, when they returned to development, he was worried that the franchise might be left behind if they didn't make a leap to 3D graphics. To test the waters, Square developed an interactive tech demo for the 1995 SIGGRAPH convention, an annual event focused on computer graphics. This demo dubbed Final Fantasy VI, the interactive game, but also known as Final Fantasy SGI, named after the Silicon Graphics Inc. Onyx workstation used to create it. It showcased a battle featuring 3D renders of Terra, Locke, and Shadow from Final Fantasy VI. The demo made a big impact visually, and its gameplay, camera angles, and animations laid the groundwork for combat in Final Fantasy VII. Square decided that this was the best path forward for the series, but they needed a format with higher storage capacity to realize their vision. Dilly-dally, shilly-shally, despite their close relationship with Nintendo, Square chose to skip the N64 with its low-capacity cartridges, and instead joined Team PlayStation, which used CD-ROMs. CDs were also much cheaper than cartridges, which kept the game affordable for fans even when it shipped on multiple discs. The shift from 2D to 3D in Final Fantasy VII was more than just a visual upgrade. It revolutionized how the game's world could be designed and portrayed. No longer confined to sprites and a top-down perspective, the developers used pre-rendered images to create maps allowing for more complex and detailed backgrounds. The use of static camera angles added a cinematic flair to the world, effectively conveying a sense of scale, something you might notice right away when Avalanche navigates through Mako Reactor No. 1. However, navigating certain areas could be tricky, as the pre-rendered backgrounds sometimes made it difficult to discern exits, or determine whether an object like a ledge or wall was interactable. Fortunately, there's an option to mark Cloud with a cursor which helps you keep track of them, while red and green triangles indicate exits and climbable surfaces respectively. The game's story also benefited from a cinematic boost, thanks to the dynamic and visually impressive CG used in the full-motion video cutscenes. While it could be a bit jarring to switch from the stunning FMVs to the regular in-game graphics, Final Fantasy VII managed to tie these moments together smoothly enough to avoid breaking immersion. Though the transition isn't as seamless when shifting into combat. In the overworld, you have these blocky, cute little low-poly models, but once you enter battle, the models switch to more detailed versions that better match Tetsuya Nomura's character designs. The developers couldn't achieve the dynamic and realistic combat they wanted using the chibi overworld models, so the more proportionate, detailed models were a must. Even so, the development team felt the art style shift between models was jarring, which is why in Final Fantasy VIII they opted to keep character models more consistent both in and out of battle. Despite its simplicity in some areas, I still really appreciate Final Fantasy VII's art design and graphics. The game excels at painting a sci-fi and industrial setting, and the diverse biomes combined with detailed environments help keep towns and areas from feeling too similar or forgettable. Many locations feature unique architecture and NPCs, adding to the world's realism and cultural diversity. While the pre-rendered backgrounds were impressive for their time, they haven't aged as well in the HD era, and now noticeably lag behind the 3D models in the more recent re-releases of Final Fantasy VII. Granted, that's more Square Enix's fault, as pretty much every re-release of their older Final Fantasy titles tend to have some issues along with the graphical problems, but depending on what you're playing the game on or the size of the screen you're playing it on, you may not even notice a difference in graphical quality. Still, Final Fantasy VII's graphics have this timeless charm, and I'm surprised more indie RPGs haven't tried to recreate that feeling. Crow Country is the only recent game I can think of that captures that look, though it's a survival horror game and not an RPG. Go play it though, Crow Country is awesome. Returning to the opening bombing mission, despite Cloud's attitude and his former ties to Shinra, most of Avalanche is friendly and courteous to him. Biggs respects Cloud's strength and former status as a soldier. Wedge looks up to him, believing that deep down, Cloud does care about others. And Jessie thinks he's nice, and might even have a crush on him. Man, I forgot how subtle Jessie was originally compared to the flirty thirst queen she became in Remake. The only member of the group who dislikes and distrusts Cloud is Barrett, partially because he has no patience for Cloud's too cool for school attitude, but mostly due to Cloud's former ties to Shinra. Despite his genuine passion for saving the planet, Barrett doesn't make the best first impression, especially in the original localization, where he often comes across as the stereotypical angry black guy. He's bullheaded, quick to make rash decisions, and dislikes when others undermine him or point out flaws in his plans. Barrett also has a very black and white view of Shinra, treating even the lowliest of their employees as evil, and holding them equally responsible for the planet's decline as the corporate bigwigs making the actual decisions. He shows little concern for civilians who might get caught in the crossfire of his war against Shinra too. But Barrett does have a softer side. He genuinely cares about the well-being of the others in Avalanche, and he respects Cloud's capabilities even if it takes him a while to warm up to the kid. Barrett is also a loving father to his daughter Marlene, and his mission to stop Shinra is partially motivated by his desire to create a better future for her. But as we learn much later, his fight against Shinra is far more personal than he's willing to admit. The mission to sabotage Mako Reactor No. 1 is surprisingly simple and encounters a little resistance. The group only needs to hack through a few security doors, and fight the occasional random encounter with guards or robots. It's not until Cloud and Barrett reach the reactor and plant the time bomb that they run into any trouble. First, something strange happens to Cloud. A voice in his head warns him that there's more to the reactor. Then, after setting the bomb, he and Barret are attacked by the game's first boss, the robotic guard scorpion. Cue a discussion about Final Fantasy VII's combat. Outside of specific encounters, battles in dungeons or the overworld are your standard random encounters. Before or during a fight, you can adjust your character's positions in the front or back row. Characters placed in the back row take less damage from enemy attacks, but also deal less physical attack damage. Ideally, you want to position your squishier magic casters in the back, but if a character uses a long-range weapon, like Barret with his gun arm, they still deal normal damage while benefiting from the back row's defensive advantage. So positioning plays a significant role in maximizing each character's effectiveness. Combat also cycles through various battle formations. Besides the standard setup with your party and enemies on opposite sides, there are back attacks where enemies ambush you for extra damage on their first turn, and preemptive attacks where your team ambushes the enemy. Then there's the attacks from both sides where your party is surrounded by enemies, and side attack where your team surrounds the enemy instead. I won't delve into the specifics of how the game determines which formation occurs, but these different setups add visual variety to combat. While earlier Final Fantasy games featured various encounters, the battles were static in presentation, with your party and monsters trading blows from opposite sides of the screen. Occasionally, flashy spell and monster attack animations spice things up. However, the transition to 3D allowed for more dynamic fights, with the camera shifting around the battlefield, changing angles to focus on your party, or the enemies depending on the actions taking place. This is why the developers opted for more detailed and proportioned models in combat, as it enabled unique and engaging animations. Your party members have idle animations while waiting to attack, and their attack animations change based on their weapon type. The same goes for casting magic or being hit with a status effect. Each character also has a unique victory animations that reflect their personality. Cloud swings his big sword around, and Barret does a fist bump, for example. While these additions make combat more visually engaging, they do come with the drawback of extending the duration of fights. Even without using spells or summons with lengthy animations, combat can feel sluggish as you wait for an enemy to complete an action. While I personally don't find it too bad, I understand why Square Enix added the speed up function in newer releases for those who want to speed through battles. Now that we've covered the combat presentation, let's move on to how the battle mechanics actually work. There's not much to say, right? It's turn-based combat. Scroll through a menu to choose your move while your enemy waits, attack them, wait while the enemy attacks you, rinse and repeat. Well, not really, as Final Fantasy and RPGs in general have more depth to them than detractors will ever admit. For one, Final Fantasy VII's turn-based combat uses the ATB system that was first introduced in Final Fantasy IV. The Active Time Battle, or ATB system, in Final Fantasy VII uses a gauge for both your party members and enemies to determine who gets to attack next. How fast the gauge fills is based on the individual speed stat. While similar to traditional turn-based combat, ATB doesn't pause enemy actions when it's your turn, meaning they can keep attacking while you're deciding on your next move, whether that's selecting a spell or digging through your inventory for a healing item. This can make battles feel more frantic, as you need to stay alert to what's happening while planning your next move. However, blindly attacking as soon as your gauge fills isn't always wise, as the Guard Scorpion boss fight illustrates. As you lower the boss's health, it raises its tail, and you need to wait for it to lower before attacking again. Otherwise, it counters with a powerful laser attack. This boss is designed to teach you to be mindful of your timing, as some enemies will switch between different states whether it's safe to attack them. Or, like the ghost enemies in the train graveyard, they might shift to a state where they become invulnerable, disappearing after an attack and becoming immune to damage for a short time. Unfortunately, many first-time players of Final Fantasy VII didn't quite catch on to this lesson during the Guard Scorpion fight. Cloud's advice in the original PlayStation release was infamously awkward, with him shouting, "Barret, be careful, attack while its tail's up," followed by, "It'll counterattack with its laser." The gap between these sentences often led players to misunderstand and attack when they shouldn't, resulting in a painful laser counterattack. While the game could have included more enemies to reinforce this idea, the lesson on timing and patience keeps combat from devolving into just mashing the attack button until your enemies drop. Though if you're the type of person who is indecisive in making their next move, or an idiot like me who always struggles to find an X potion in my inventory, you can change the combat settings. Beyond the standard ATB mode where time constantly moves during battle, you can switch to wait mode, which pauses time when you're in a submenu selecting a spell or item. The game's default setting, recommended mode, blends both by pausing time only during attack animations. These combat modes essentially replace a traditional difficulty system. Wait mode acts as easy, recommended as normal, and ATB is hard. So pick your poison and have a blast. Before we dive back into the plot, there's one more key aspect of combat to discuss: limit breaks. Effectively powerful super moves, they function as a sort of comeback mechanic. During battle, as your character takes damage, a small gauge beside the ATB gauge begins to fill. Once it's full, your standard attack is replaced by a limit break, a big flashy move that can deal significant damage to one or more enemies, inflict debuffs, or even heal and buff your team. Each character has multiple limit breaks that can be unlocked across 4 tier levels, with a few exceptions I'll mention later. To unlock a new limit break within the same tier, you need to use the previous one a certain number of times. For example, Cloud needs to use his first limit break, Braver, a total of 8 times before he can unlock his next tier 1 limit break, Cross Slash. To advance to the next tier of limit breaks, your character needs to defeat a specific number of enemies. Using Cloud again as an example, he would need to kill at least 120 enemies to regress to level 2 and unlock Blade Beam. This system encourages players to use limit breaks whenever possible, rather than saving them exclusively for boss battles. It also promotes rotating characters in and out of your party, so everyone gets a chance to accumulate the necessary kills for their stronger moves, assuming you're not sticking to a fixed team. The level 4 limit breaks, however, require more effort to unlock, but I'll touch on that later when we discuss side quests. After defeating the guard Scorpion, Cloud activates the timer on the bomb, giving you 10 minutes to escape. Despite the timer continuing during battles, and a brief stop to help Jesse, this is more than enough time. Once everyone makes it out, Mako Reactor number 1 is blown to smithereens. Avalanche will escape to Sector 8, where the group agrees to meet on the next train heading to the Sector 7 slums before they split up. While the mission was a success, the destruction of the reactor caused significant collateral damage. Buildings and cars are wrecked, people are panicking in the streets, and it's reported later that there were several civilian casualties. Amidst the chaos, one person who remains calm is the flower girl from the opening cinematic. There's not much to say about her just yet, but when you speak to her, you're given the option to tell her to leave for her safety, or to change the subject about asking about her flowers, which gives you another option to buy one. While this interaction might seem insignificant, it's the first example of Final Fantasy VII allowing for a bit of role-playing through dialogue choices. Although these choices won't dramatically alter the course of the game, like in something like Fallout New Vegas, they can influence how other NPCs perceive Cloud. Depending on your responses, characters will see him as the uncaring mercenary he comes off as, or see that there's more to him than meets the eye. How you choose to have Cloud behave can extend conversations, get you some useful items for your journey, let you skip some battles, or occasionally earn you an item. Your choices might feel like small potatoes, but the game deceptively downplays how important Cloud's choices actually are. But I've got to save that sweet reveal for much later. After eluding Shinra guards in Sector 8, Cloud hops on a train to reunite with the rest of Avalanche. During the ride, Jesse offers a rundown on how public transportation operates in Midgar, and laments the city's living conditions. Built on a massive plate 50 meters above the ground, supported by several columns, Midgar consists of 8 sectors, each powered by its own Mako reactor. Except Sector 1, cause, you know, we just blew up their reactor. At the city's core stands the towering Shinra Building, a symbol of corporate arrogance. While Midgar is a marvel of technology, its luxuries are not enjoyed by all. Beneath the expansive pizza in the sky, the Undercity's less fortunate residents live in the shadows of the elite, with the massive structure even blocking out the sun. The inhabitants of the slums face harsh conditions, their dilapidated homes cobbled together, surviving only with the hopes of securing work above. Mako's wonders come at a dual cost, exploiting the planet's life force and its people. It's almost as if the game is commenting on the evils of corporate greed or something. Finally, arriving at Sector 7, the group convenes at the Seventh Heaven Bar, managed by another Avalanche member, Cloud's childhood friend, and Italian icon, Tifa Lockhart. Tifa, our next party member, primarily fights using martial arts, equipped with various gloves and knuckles found throughout the game. Her limit breaks, unlike other characters, string together multiple martial arts moves into one long combo, the outcome of which, hits, misses, and criticals, is determined by your success with the slot reels. With the right equipment, Tifa can become a formidable force, reminiscent of the Black Belt and Monk jobs from previous Final Fantasy titles, though this game doesn't use a class or job system. I'll touch on that shortly. Despite her aggressive fighting style and fan-servicey design, which might suggest she's a stereotypical tomboy, Tifa is actually akin to the girl next door, motherly, empathetic, and always ready to support her friends, whether it's taking care of Marlene or securing work for Cloud and Avalanche. However, Tifa is reserved, often keeping her true feelings to herself. She's also the only one with enough patience to handle Cloud when he's being particularly stubborn. This is evident when she stops him from storming off during a dispute with Barrett over pay. In this moment, Tifa reminds Cloud of a childhood promise they made in their hometown of Nibelheim, triggering a flashback to 7 years prior. As the boys in town prepared to leave in search of work, Cloud was determined to join Soldier and emulate his hero Sephiroth, even though it meant not returning for a long time. Tifa, wanting assurance, asked Cloud to promise that he'd come to her rescue if she ever needed him, allowing her to experience being saved by her hero. This trip down memory lane goes completely over Cloud's head, though as despite achieving his dream of joining Soldier, he insists he can't keep their promise since he isn't a hero or famous, the knucklehead failing to catch on that Tifa just wanted him to be there for her when she needed him. Still, that reminder of their childhood promise convinces him to stay and participate in the next mission, for double the pay. Tifa will join us for this mission, but before we leave for Mako Reactor number 5, we're given an optional tutorial on how to use Materia. Unlike previous Final Fantasy titles, Final Fantasy VII does away with the usual job system. Instead, characters' spells and abilities depend on the materia they're equipped with. Materia can be acquired in shops, found in the world, become pre-equipped with new party members, or drop as boss rewards. Your armor and weapons have materia slots, and the number of materia a character can equip depends on their available slots. Each equipped materia gains AP from battle, leveling up to unlock new and more powerful spells. Materia comes in 5 delicious fun-filled flavors. You got green apple or magic, lemon or command, blueberry or support, grape or independent, and cherry or summon. Magic materia encompasses a range of spells from offensive, like fire and ice, to supportive, like cure and barrier, and affects your stats by increasing MP and magic stats while decreasing HP and physical stats. While these stat decreases become negligible later in the game, they prevent you from being overpowered in the early game, and encourage spreading materia amongst party members. This is crucial as having all your powerful materia on one character can be risky if that character falls in battle. Command materia offers extra commands like Sense, which reveals enemy stats, or Steal, allowing you to take items from foes. These don't affect your stats negatively, but can boost dexterity or luck. Support materia enhances adjacent materia and link slots, such as All, which allows you to use single target spells on multiple enemies, or Elemental, which adds elemental or static effects based on its linked spell when equipped on weapons, or adds elemental or status resistances based on its linked spell when equipped on armor. Individual materia includes stat boosters like HP Plus, and unique abilities such as Cover, which lets a character shield allies, or Long Range, allowing back row attacks with full power. Finally, the rarest type, Summon materia, calls upon the power of the gods like Shiva and Ifrit to do powerful attacks, which requires you to sit through long and unskippable animations every time you summon them. These come with high MP costs and significant stat decreases, along with requiring high AP to level up, limiting how often you can use a summon in battle. Besides a few exceptions, finding summons requires some effort, and they can be permanently missed if not collected during specific parts of the story. Thanks to Materia's versatility, you can tailor the roles of your party members to suit any situation. For instance, Cloud can serve as your primary magic user in one battle, and switch to being your healer in the next. This makes situations where someone temporarily leaves the party a non-issue, as you can just give their materia to someone else to use. Since the character isn't locked to a job, you can comfortably rotate out who is in your party, and not limit yourself to using the same 3 characters for an optimal build. Granted, because of some minor stat differences between characters, and some limit breaks coming up short compared to others, that could still happen, but it's not really necessary. Overall, I love the materia system, and all the options it opens up for battle, but the versatility does end up nuking the game's difficulty after a certain point, especially once you set up certain materia and weapon combinations, at which point you can breeze through the final battles. But hey, becoming an unstoppable god of death is pretty fun too, and it does require some time and probably a guide to get to that point. Cool, well I think I've covered everything I need to about materia. There's a couple materia I'll discuss later when I find them during my playthrough, but let's get this story moving again. After catching a train back to the surface, the group is forced to disembark early due to a failed attempt to sneak past the security checkpoint. They end up trekking through rail tunnels to reach the next reactor, and it turns out Jesse's attempt to create a special fake ID for Cloud backfired when it triggered the security scan. Poor kid. Unlike the others who helped blow up Mako Reactor 1, she's guilt-ridden by the civilian casualties. Speaking to Jessie back at 7th Heaven, she thinks she screwed up in making the bomb they used, as it wasn't supposed to do that much damage. I mentioned it earlier when discussing Barrett's character, but it can be easy to forget that Avalanche aren't entirely the clean-cut good guys. Speaking to people around Midgar, they don't have many fans either. Kinda hard to get people on board with saving the planet when your antics do more damage to them than the evil corporation you're trying to take down. Well, no time to dwell on that. We got another reactor to destroy. Navigating through reactor number 5, which looks exactly like the first reactor, when we reach the spot to plant the bomb, Cloud has another freakout. He sees a vision of a younger Tifa grieving over her dead father, who was seemingly killed by the hero of Soldier, Sephiroth. Cloud snaps back to reality but doesn't explain what he saw before they plant the bomb and leg it. The group's path to freedom is barred by several Shinra grunts, and they find themselves face to face with Shinra Inc.'s president, President Shinra. Yeah, I didn't know this, but apparently President isn't just a title, but his actual first name too? Gotta wonder what his parents were smoking when they named him that. The Prez doesn't say much. He does recognize Cloud as a former soldier due to his distinct Mako-infused eyes, but he fails to recall his name. After a brief mention of Sephiroth, he departs, leaving the group to confront the Airbuster. The floating mech is a fairly easy boss fight, but proves highly combustible, exploding upon defeat and collapsing the walkway beneath Cloud, who reassures his friends he'll be fine before falling into the abyss. While unconscious, he'll speak to a mysterious voice in his head, who ignores Cloud's questions on who they are, and that cryptically advise him to focus on himself. Coming to, our hero finds himself lying in a bed of flowers in the church in Sector 5. I'm guessing the wooden roof and flowers broke his fall somehow, though he's probably just super durable since he's infused with Mako when joining Soldier. Cloud isn't alone though, as he's reunited with the flower girl from before. Wait a second, Eris? Hang on just a bit while I fix that. There's probably someone in the comments seething right now. There we go, Aerith. Oh, look at you. You're as beautiful as the day I lost you. Aerith is our next party member, and with her stats leaning more towards magic, her main weapon being a staff, and her limit breaks focusing on healing and buffing the party, or debuffing enemies, makes her the unofficial white mage of our group. Like Tifa, her character design contrasts with her personality, as her plain and more conservative dress might lead you to assume she's supposed to be the reserved, meek, or pure good girl archetype, but nope. Aerith is outgoing, extroverted, street smart, and a bit of a flirt. She's fairly upbeat regardless of the situation, and can see right through Cloud's tough guy act, teasing and flustering him in an attempt to get the dingus to open up. Unfortunately, Aerith and Cloud's meet cute gets cut short when some Shinra grunts arrive, led by Reno of the Turks. The Turks are Shinra's covert operatives, who scout for potential soldier candidates, carried out assassinations and kidnappings too. Forced to flee, Cloud assumes the role of Aerith's bodyguard. She brushes off the encounter as typical, evading questions about Shinra's interest in her. Instead, she convinces Cloud to stick around a little longer to escort her to her home in the Sector 5 slums. On the way there, we'll briefly stop to check in on some random hobo. This guy are sick indeed. Arriving at Aerith's home, Cloud meets her mother, Elmira, and ends up spending the night as Aerith insists on tagging along to show him how to get back to Sector 7. Man, sleeping over and meeting her parents on the first date? I don't know, Cloud. I think Aerith might be too fast for you. You should take your mom's advice of finding an older girl who can take care of you. After snoozing and dreaming of his mom, Cloud will sneak out and try to ditch Aerith, but she catches up to him. Sorry, buddy. You're stuck with her. Oh, and don't forget to check out this one particular poster before you leave. Super important. Oh no, it's a sentient house. Look out! Alright, I'm not going to go on for several minutes discussing Final Fantasy VII's monster design, but I love it when these games throw a bizarre and out there creature for you to fight, like the Hell House. Like, why does this exist? Why does it turn into a mech? Was it created by Shinra? Did Sephiroth do this? Why does such a cool monster idea not drop a cool item for beating it? And why doesn't it have a plush? Alright, I'm done. Time for a cute playground date. While chatting, Aerith will bring up her first boyfriend who was ranked Soldier First Class just like Cloud. Before we learn the guy's name, and if Cloud knows him, a chocobo carriage with Tifa sitting in the back passes by on its way to Sector 6. Intrigued to see what she's up to, Aerith continues to stick around as she and Cloud head over to the Wall Market. Wall Market. I love this place. The people, the music, how every inch of it just oozes sleaze. It's amazing how much the developers were able to get away with during this section, and still keep a T rating. Asking around about Tifa, we find out she's on her way to visit the local slumlord Don Corneo. Heading to his mansion, the guard at the door won't let Cloud in since the Don isn't into men, but he is willing to let Aerith through. Cloud doesn't want to send her in by herself, but he doesn't want to barge in and start a commotion, potentially endangering Tifa. Oh, what is an ex-soldier first class to do? If Cloud can't get in because he's a man, then he'll just have to dress up like a girl, right? It's cross-dressing side quest time. Okay, it's technically not a side quest since making Cloud the belle of the ball is mandatory to progress the plot, but there are some optional things you can do to ensure he goes through a Laney Boggs she's all that transformation. First, we need to get him the best dress, which involves speaking to the cashier at the boutique, and then her father at the bar. Tell him we want something soft and shimmering, and he'll make us a silk dress. Next, we're going to need a wig, so we'll head over to the local gym, get into a contest to see who can do the most squats in 30 seconds, and win ourselves a blonde wig. While technically this is enough to get Cloud inside Don Corneo's mansion, we could still do better. Speaking to the Materia store owner, he'll send us to buy something from the inn vending machine, and after bringing it back, he'll give us a diamond tiara. Heading to the ramen restaurant, we'll get a pharmacy coupon after ordering today's special. Then we'll redeem that at the pharmacy for a digestive. Give it to the girl puking her guts out at the bar, and she'll give us sexy cologne. Just one more thing and we'll be done. Talking to this guy in white, he'll give Cloud his membership card to the Honeybee Inn. Which is, yeah, it's definitely a brothel. Don't think about it. Just talk to one of the girls in the back, she'll do Cloud's makeup, and Cinderella is officially ready for the ball. But, before we leave, we can stumble upon some rather interesting things. First, if Cloud decides to rent one of the rooms, he starts to freak out and have an existential crisis, with a vision of himself asking him why he's here. I don't know, maybe Cloud is just lonely and wants some company. Don't judge him. Man, I must have heard this music hundreds of times in creepypasta or analog horror videos over the years, and it was only recently that I realized it came from this scene in Final Fantasy VII. It's why I ended up using it for that overdramatic intro I did in the Simpsons video a few months ago. After passing out, Cloud will come to and find a burly man laying on top of him, slapping him awake. Don't think about it. Before we leave, we can spy on a couple of the rooms we can't enter. The lover's room has an elderly couple inside, who are confused about being here, and from the sounds of it, their grandson probably booked them this place by mistake. Also, there's this thing in the corner bouncing around for some reason. And in the Queen's room, President Shinra is acting out some weird play with some of his employees. I'm guessing it's supposed to be some kind of BDSM session, and this was as safe as the developers could make it without catching an M rating. Maybe? Don't think about it. Alright, after Cloud changes into his new duds, and Aerith does the same, we'll get access to Don Corneo's mansion. Once inside, we'll find Tifa in the mansion's torture room / sex dungeon. After she and Aerith share pleasantries, Cloud will speak to her, explaining why he's in drag before questioning why she's here in the first place. Tifa explains Barrett caught some weirdo outside of the bar, and after interrogating him, Don Corneo's name came up. Curious about why he had someone watching the place, she decided to get answers straight from the horse's mouth. But the only way she was going to get close to him was to get chosen as his bride for the night. You know, sex. Caught up on the situation, Cloud and Aerith agree to help her, and all three of them are lined up before Don Corneo, so he can choose which one of them to sleep with. And if you did all those extra steps I mentioned before, he'll pick Cloud. Once alone with Don Corneo, the trio will reveal their intentions and interrogate the Don under threat of destroying his dick. He spills the beans he was hired by Shinra's director of public security, Heidegger, to look for Barrett and by extension, Avalanche's hideout. Shinra plans to crush them, literally, by dropping the Sector 7 plate on them and everyone in the Sector 7 slums. The Don then bamboozles the trio and drops them down his trapdoor. We're then briefly taken to a scene with President Shinra speaking to Heidegger and his director of urban development, Reeve. Reeve opposes the plan to drop the plate, but his pleas fall on deaf ears. While stupidly excessive, President Shinra is basically creating a false flag operation, dropping the plate to take out Avalanche, making them look responsible for it, and making Shinra Inc. look like the good guys by going in to help with rescue operations. Switching back to our trio, Don Corneo's trap drops them into the sewers and into a boss battle with his pet, Apps. After taking it out, we'll pick up the steel materia before exiting the sewers. Aw man, I miss how useful stealing items from monsters used to be in these games. Unlike the remake trilogy, where you can use it as a way to farm a few crafting items at best, here in the original Final Fantasy VII, it had way more mileage. You could get good weapons and armor off some enemies much earlier than you would normally, carrying you for a good chunk of time before you made it to the next important section in the story. For example, after leaving the sewers, you'll enter the train graveyard, and if you encounter a rare enemy called Eligor, you can steal the striking staff off of it for Aerith. Yeah, unless you're using a guide, there's no way to know what enemy holds what, but it felt rewarding when you did get something. Sometimes trying to make things less frustrating for the players ends up removing what made experimenting fun in the first place. But that's a rant for another video. After exiting the train graveyard, we'll frantically run to the Sector 7 pillar. Shinra is already there preparing to destroy it, and Barret, Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge are fighting as hard as they can to stop them. Unfortunately, it's a losing fight, as when we get close, poor Wedge gets flung off the pillar. Speaking to him, he's happy Cloud remembers his name, and urges him to help Barret before he passes. Aerith will then leave the party when Tifa asks her to head back to the bar to find and get Marlene to safety. On the way, we'll find Biggs injured, who Cloud can reassure that he does care about the planet before he dies. Climbing up higher, we'll find Jessie next, who's happy she got to talk to Cloud one last time, but has made her peace with dying as she believes it's her punishment for the civilians who died during the destruction of Mako Reactor 1. Honestly, while a bit sad, the deaths of Wedge, Biggs, and Jessie lacks any real emotional weight, since we barely spent that much time with them, or got to know them. Barret will carry that burden for the remainder of the game, but the three of them are brought up so little it's kinda easy to forget them. While Final Fantasy VII Remake has its issues, one of its bigger positives was how it developed the three of them as better characters. So when we got to Remake's version of this scene, it felt devastating to lose them. But I'll talk more about that if I ever do videos on Remake and Rebirth. Reaching the top of the pillar, we'll regroup with Barret and get thrown into a boss battle with Reno of the Turks. While we managed to defeat him, he'd already activated the plate's emergency release system, and as revealed by Sang, the leader of the Turks who shows up to save Reno, only a Shinra executive can deactivate the release system. The jerk also captured Aerith and spills the beans on why Shinra was after her. She's the last of the Ancients, also known as the Cetra. As Aerith is taken away, Cloud, Barret, and Tifa are forced to flee for their lives before we're shown a harrowing scene of the plate being dropped and falling on the slums below. Thousands of lives all wiped out in an instant. Our heroes wake up in the outskirts of Sector 6, Sector 7 no longer accessible, and now buried under tons of debris. Faced with the destruction, Barret lashes out in agony over the death of his comrades, his daughter, and the rest of the people of Sector 7. After he's had a moment to calm down, Tifa fills him in that Aerith got Marlene to safety. While they're not quite sure where she took Marlene, the best place to start searching would be Aerith's home in Sector 5. On the way, Cloud is curious about what the Ancients are, recalling someone else had claimed to be an Ancient too, Sephiroth. Speaking to Aerith's mom, Elmira, she confirms what Sang said earlier, and that Aerith isn't her biological daughter. Years ago, while Elmira's husband was fighting in the war against Wutai, she received a letter saying he was granted leave, but when she went to the train station to meet him, he was a no-show. Hoping his leave had just been cancelled, she continued to wait at the station daily. One day while waiting, Elmira found Aerith and her biological mother, Ifalna. The two had escaped from a Shinra research lab, where they had been held captive for years. Sadly, Ifalna was mortally wounded during their escape, and entrusted Elmira with taking care of Aerith. Alone and childless, Elmira decided to raise Aerith as her own. As Elmira grew attached to Aerith, she noticed that the girl had unusual abilities. Aerith once mentioned she sensed her mother's spirit returning to the planet, and later she would tell Elmira that someone close to her had passed away, and that his spirit had tried to reach her before returning to the planet. A few days later, Elmira received a letter confirming that her husband had been killed in the war. Sometime later, Sang of the Turks approached Elmira, attempting to take Aerith by revealing her identity as an Ancient, and her ability to hear the voices of the planet. He tried to convince her that Aerith was destined to lead them to the Promised Land and bring salvation. However, Aerith refused to go, so Shinra resorted to just keeping an eye on her, occasionally attempting to capture her, as they did during her introduction in the church. They only managed to succeed this time because Aerith had Marlene with her, when she was stopped by Sang. so she gave herself up in exchange for the little girl's safety. After Barrett has an emotional reunion with Marlene, the trio head to Shinra HQ to save Aerith. Heading to Wall Market, they scale a series of cables and scrap metal to reach the surface and the entrance of the towering Shinra Building. You can choose to either storm through the front door guns blazing, or take the quieter route of ascending the stairs. While the stairway is free of enemies, it's a tedious climb. 60 flights in total. It's generally better to go through the front door, where you can battle enemies to level up your characters, and collect some scattered items. Plus, there's an important poster near the elevators that's worth checking out. A lot happens on our journey up the Shinra Building, including some faulty elevator shenanigans, a quick little stealth minigame, a couple of puzzles we need to complete to proceed, and we even meet the mayor of Midgar, Mayor Domino. I'm a big fan of yours, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe any of those allegations getting thrown around, like how you're just a figurehead and a puppet of the Shinra, or that you've been having an affair with your secretary. On the 66th floor, the gang climbs into the air vents through the bathroom and spies on a Shinra board meeting. Here, we're introduced to two more executives, Palmer, who oversees the barely funded space program, and Scarlet, the head of the Advanced Weaponry Division. President Shinra reveals that he has no intentions of rebuilding the destroyed Sector 7. Instead, he plans to raise the rates on Mako production for the remaining sectors. The greedy jerk is also planning to abandon Midgar altogether. With Aerith back in their possession, he believes she'll lead them to the Promised Land, a place rumored to house an almost infinite supply of Mako, which he sees as the perfect location to build his new Neo Midgar. Right on cue, his top scientist, Professor Hojo, arrives to report on his research on Aerith. While Hojo's research seems to be progressing, he admits that fully understanding Aerith and the agents may take longer than their lifetimes. Or hers. So, befitting his evil scientist nature, Hojo proposes breeding Aerith and using whatever children she has to finish their research. The identity of her proposed breeding partner only further reveals Hojo's depravity, showing how he dehumanizes Aerith and others, treating them as mere lab experiments. Following Hojo to his lab, Cloud peers into a storage tank labeled Genova, and suffers another episode upon seeing the headless body of the strange creature inside. Cloud recognizes the creature, and once again mentions Sephiroth. Finally, we'll find Aerith and free her from her containment, along with the creature Hojo intended to breed her with. Gross. However, this creature isn't just a random monster, it's a sentient being capable of speech. After being freed, he attacks Hojo and joins the party, introducing himself as Red 13, the designation given to him by Shinra. I don't know if Red species is ever properly named, but he's a lion-wolf thing with fire on his tail who, outside of his claws and fangs, also uses various headdresses in battle. He has decently high dexterity and HP when he first joins the party, and his limit breaks feature a mix of damage-dealing attacks and buffs for the party. As a character, there isn't much to say about Red yet. He's rather reserved, gives off the vibe of a wise older warrior, but yeah, that's about it. Grateful to the main party for freeing him, Red intends to stay with them only until he can return home. While I like Red, and he does experience some character growth later on, it's easy to overlook him, especially if you don't include him in the main party when the group splits up. After defeating the boss that Hojo sprang on us, we can enter the chamber Aerith was in to pick up the most versatile materia in the game, enemy skill materia. Similar to the blue mages in previous games, your characters can learn abilities from certain monsters when they use them on the party, provided the enemy skill materia is equipped. Building up the materia does take some effort. You need to know which enemies possess the abilities you can learn, where to find them, and of course, you gotta survive the encounter in order to acquire the skill. In some cases, you need to use to manipulate materia to force enemies to use the desired move, but once you've mastered these steps, you'll have access to some incredibly powerful abilities. Among the best abilities you can acquire are White Wind and Big Guard. White Wind acts as a combination of Cure and Asuna, healing the party based on the caster's current HP, and removing any status effects. Big Guard, on the other hand, boosts the party's defenses and casts Haste to speed up the ATB gauge. While these abilities won't completely break the game, at least not early on when you only have one enemy skill materia, they do make the second half of Disc 1 considerably easier. As the party continues their ascent through the Shinra Building, they'll split up to cover more ground. However, they don't get far before being captured by the Turks and brought before President Shinra. He goes on his motive rant of needing Aerith to find the Promised Land before locking everyone up. But things take a dark turn when the group escapes their cells. Something sinister has been unleashed in the building. The corporate hallways are now stained with blood, and bodies lie scattered everywhere. Grim music replaces the usual battle theme, and the Shinra machines and soldiers you previously fought have been replaced by strange monsters. This is Sephiroth's doing. He freed Jenova from its containment and killed President Shinra on his way out. According to Palmer, who witnessed the chaos, Sephiroth won't allow Shinra to find the Promised Land. However, when Barrett suggests that Sephiroth might share their goal and might be a good guy, Cloud dismisses the idea, convinced that Sephiroth has a different, more ominous agenda. We're then introduced to President Shinra's son, Rufus Shinra, who isn't all too sad that his daddy got turned into a shish kebab, probably because he's been promoted to the new president of Shinra Inc. Charismatic and ambitious, Rufus isn't as cartoonishly evil as his dad, and as we're shown later, was appalled by the plan of dropping the Sector 7 plate. That said, he does have ambitions to rule the world, and would rather do it through fear as opposed to using money. After meeting him, we'll face two more boss battles. Aerith, Barrett, and Red take on Shinra mechs in the elevators, while Cloud fights Rufus and his dog alone. Meanwhile, Tifa just kinda holds down the fort, I guess. After Rufus manages to escape, the party regroups in the first floor lobby, leading to a cool FMV scene where they make their escape. Cloud steals a motorcycle while the rest of the group squeezes into a tiny pickup truck. This is followed by a minigame where Cloud must protect his friends from Shinra grunts that are following them. The controls are a bit clunky, but fortunately the sequence is brief. The boss battle that immediately follows isn't too challenging either. As the party gazes off into the horizon, their next goal becomes clear: to pursue Sephiroth, uncover his plans, and learn what he knows about the Promised Land and the Ancients. With one final look at the giant metal pizza in the sky, our time in Midgar comes to an end, as the party heads toward Calm. This whole section only took 7 hours. I probably could have shaved an hour off, but I stopped a lot to take notes. No wonder Remake had such a hard time stretching Midgar out to 40 hours. Also, holy shit, we're like, what, an hour into this video? And I just finished discussing Midgar? This is going to be as long as my GTA 5 video, isn't it? Well, like all of my longer videos, the first half is front-loaded with discussions on the various gameplay mechanics, so the rest of the video should flow a lot smoother and faster. That said, it's time to stop the story again because I want to talk about the world map. Honestly, I prefer this take on portraying and exploring the world over the more realistic open worlds of today. There's this wow moment when you step out of Midgar for the first time. As big as that place was, it's only a small part of a much bigger world. Older video game worlds had a greater sense of mystery and a drive for exploration, helping to create a real sense of adventure. While they were smaller back then, your brain did the work to make the world feel much bigger. Access to off-limit areas or returning to older ones felt incredibly rewarding when you eventually unlocked a vehicle or mount needed to reach those places, especially if there are new quests to undertake or items to collect. It was also a great way to hide secret monsters or ones too tough for the players to fight yet, subtly guiding them in the right direction without forcing them into a linear hallway. Modern open worlds, while certainly bigger, often feel large just for the sake of it. All that space is often used to scatter the same set of repetitive quests across the map. I'm not gonna lie, this did sour my experience with Rebirth a bit since it ends up adopting that design. The only recent games that captured that old school RPG world feeling for me were Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and to some extent The Witcher 3. And while the game definitely had its problems, Final Fantasy XV's open world came close to capturing that same feeling for me. I just wish Square had tried to build and improve on what they had with that, instead of cutting it out altogether for Final Fantasy XVI. Despite everything I just said about the world map, ironically, the overworld theme isn't meant to add to that sense of adventure. Final Fantasy VII's composer, Nobuo Uematsu, intended for players to experience a different atmosphere compared to earlier RPGs, intentionally removing the energetic tempo that typically motivates players to begin their adventure. Instead, certain sections of the music soar melodiously, while others evoke a sense of unease, resulting in a diverse range of emotions within the same piece. I'm not an expert at dissecting music. Creative writing was more my thing in school, so I can't break down why a song works the way it does. I can only describe how it makes me feel or what I think it's trying to convey. When first leaving Midgar, the main theme does a great job of instilling a sense of peace after everything you've just been through, including the tragedy of Sector 7. But later in the story, it takes on a much more somber and almost heartbreaking tone after some tragic events come to pass. Even further into the game, after things get particularly bleak, it feels outright triumphant when you hear it again after hours of absence. While I personally prefer Uematsu's work on Final Fantasy X, 7's soundtrack is definitely up there for the best music in the franchise. I'm not sure where I'd rank it exactly, as I think Masashi Hamauzu's work on Final Fantasy XIII's music is seriously underrated, but that's a discussion for another time. So let's mosey and make our way to the next town. The farther we get from Midgar, the more the desolate land is gradually replaced by the vibrant fields of green until we reach the quaint town of Calm. A fraction of the size of the industrial behemoth Midgar, Calm feels more akin to the European-inspired towns of the older Final Fantasy games. The same goes for the interiors, with shops and people's homes losing the modern city vibe from Midgar. The visual design, combined with the track that plays here, makes Calm a warm and inviting place. Unfortunately, the good vibes don't last long once we reunite with the party at the inn. Cloud informs the others about his history with Sephiroth, how he joined Soldier to be just like him, and how they eventually became friends after working several missions together. Though he admits friends might be a stretch, and they were closer to war buddies. Still, Cloud felt like they trusted each other. That was until the day everything fell apart. The Nibelheim Incident. How many different versions of it exist now? The game will then flash back 5 years, with Cloud riding in the back of a truck along with a couple of Shinra grunts, and the man himself, Sephiroth. They've been dispatched to Nibelheim to investigate a Mako reactor on Mount Nibel, where reports of monsters had surfaced. Unlike his current standoffish self, Cloud was surprisingly more lively and friendly while serving in Soldier, even showing some concern for one of the faceless grunts who is having motion sickness. The truck will briefly stop when a monster appears in the road, Sephiroth and Cloud easily dispatching it. Well, I should say Sephiroth easily dispatches it, showcasing just how powerful he was in comparison to the rookie Soldier. When the group arrived in Nibelheim, Sephiroth asked Cloud how it felt to return to his hometown. Curious, since Sephiroth himself had no hometown. He reveals that his mother's name was Genova, but when it comes to his father, he just breaks out in laughter and doesn't name him. Remember this for later. The group spend the night at the inn, and interestingly, Sephiroth mentions recognizing the inn's scenery, wondering why he felt as though he had been here before. Cloud visits his mother, but their conversation is broken up by strange cuts, as if he couldn't recall their whole interaction. He also stops by Tifa's house, only to find it empty. Wow, just letting yourself into someone's house when they're not there? That's pretty rude, Cloud. Tifa actually calls him out on this, asking if he entered a room, which you can choose how to answer. Same goes for jamming on her piano. And checking her wardrobe to find her orthopedic underwear. And man, did I fall into a giant rabbit hole trying to figure out what they were supposed to be. I always thought it was supposed to be granny panties, or a sports bra and a joke about Tifa's magumbos, but it's just a weird localization choice. In Japanese, they're panties and called Choto Shinobi Pantsu, which is an idiomatic thing that implies Tifa was wearing sexy underwear to try and come off as more mature than she was. Not that it even matters, as the whole thing is a joke from Cloud anyways, but yeah, I learned things. Probably things I didn't want to know, involving cut content, Don Corneo, and a different set of panties. If you know, you know. The next day, we'll meet our tour guide up the mountain, and it's Tifa. Surprisingly, she and Cloud have a rather muted reunion. You'd think they would be more ecstatic to see each other after so long. Before they set off, a fan snaps a photo of Sephiroth, Tifa, and Cloud together. During the expedition, a rope bridge snaps, causing one of the guards to fall to his death. Goodbye, nameless Shinra grunt. We didn't always see eye to eye, but when things got serious, you always had my back. At the reactor, Sephiroth and Cloud enter alone, leaving nameless Shinra grunt number 2 to keep an eye on Tifa. Inside, they find a sealed door labeled Genova. Sephiroth thinks the reactor has malfunctioned due to a broken purification tank, and asks Cloud to seal the valve. Peering inside, Sephiroth discovers that the tank contains experiments created by Hojo, musing that whatever he's up to won't put him on the same level as Professor Gast. Taking a peek inside the tank, we're shown some freaky humanoid abomination. Sephiroth explains, like soldier recruits, this thing was created by pumping it full of Mako, but like way more than usual, making it closer to himself than the usual soldier in terms of strength. And as soon as those words leave his mouth, Sephiroth starts to have an existential crisis, wondering if he was made the same way before lashing out at the pod. After returning to town, Sephiroth isolates himself in the abandoned Shinra mansion. When Cloud checks in on him, he finds Sephiroth in a secret basement, his mental state deteriorating rapidly. He's been obsessively reading books and journals on Jenova, an ancient discovered in the northern crater by Professor Gast. The research led to the Jenova project, and Sephiroth spends 3 sleepless days poring over the notes, questioning why he was never told the truth. When Cloud asks if he's alright, Sephiroth coldly dismisses him. The next time Cloud checks in, Sephiroth has completely gone off the deep end. He calls Cloud a traitor, ranting about how the Cetra are the true owners of the planet, and that humanity's ancestors betrayed them. He explains Professor Gast devised the Jenova project to use her cells to create a being with the same powers of the ancients, Sephiroth. Abandoning his humanity, he casts Cloud aside as he leaves to go see his mother. Chasing after him, Cloud finds Nibelheim consumed by flames, Sephiroth slaughtering its people before we cut to an infamy of him amongst the destruction. Man, no matter how many times I've seen this scene, or its various iterations over the years, it's still absolutely chilling. I think it's mostly because of how detached Sephiroth is during it. He's silent and nearly emotionless. He's not laughing mad or angrily cutting the villagers down, just a calm and ruthless killer. Cloud follows Sephiroth to the reactor, and finds Tifa standing over her father's body, impaled by Sephiroth's sword. Tifa angrily grabs the katana and vows revenge. She charges at Sephiroth, but he disarms her and easily cuts her down. Enraged, Cloud moves Tifa to safety and confronts Sephiroth, who coldly declares his mission to reclaim the planet for the Cetra, dismissing Cloud's pain. Sephiroth then tears a mechanical effigy of Jenova from its setting, revealing Jenova herself suspending in a tank. Declaring himself the chosen one destined to reclaim the world, Sephiroth and Cloud face off, the flashback coming to an end before we learn the outcome of their fight. Cloud can't remember how the fight ended, or what happened afterwards. He doubts that he won their duel, the difference in strength was too great, but Cloud can't explain how he survived either. Doubting the narrative Shinra painted, he believes Sephiroth's supposed death was just a cover-up for the Nibelheim Incident. Unsure why his old war buddy would only resurface now, Cloud's determined to get answers from him and find out why he was spared too. With that, the party is ready to continue their search for Sephiroth. Before leaving the inn, Barrett will give Cloud a PHS. The PHS, or Personal Handy Phone System, is a cell phone the group will use to stay in touch and is used to switch characters into our active battle party at save points or on the world map. While it helps to add some level of difficulty by locking you into a set party during longer dungeons, the PHS combined with the many times the group will split up might be the developer's way of maintaining a sense of realism, explaining away why you can't switch party members during battle, and justifying only 3 characters appearing and speaking during many story moments. That, or it could also be a memory limitation of the PS1. While there are plenty of moments when we see the whole team together, some characters can end up forgotten or barely developed unless you bother to bring them along. I'll save the discussion for later, but some of your characters will still end up feeling underdeveloped regardless of how often you keep them around too. Our next big destination is Junon, but to get there we'll need to travel east across the swamp and then through the Mithril Mines. The swamp, while traversable on foot, has a field monster called the Midgar Zolom prowling the waters. The giant serpent is insanely powerful compared to your party at this stage in the game. So, unless you did some serious grinding, it's very likely to decimate your team with its powerful beta spell. Though, if you manage to survive the attack and win the battle, while equipped with the enemy skill materia, you could end up learning beta for yourself. The powerful fire spell trivializes most encounters at this stage of the game, assuming you have the MP to use it. Still, it's better to come back to learn the spell later on when you have stronger equipment, and the Midgar Zolom will still be waiting for you. Outside, some careful maneuvering, the best way to cross the swamp safely is to get our hands on a chocobo. Entering the conveniently placed chocobo farm that's right next to the swamp, we can first talk to a chocobo in a holding pen in order to receive our first summon materia, the Choco Mog Summon. Inside the main house, Chocobo Bill explains how to safely cross the swamp, and his grandson Billy gives you the rundown on catching your own Chocobo. First, you'll need to buy the Chocobo lore Materia from him for about 2,000 gil. This will let you encounter Chocobo battles around the tracks on the world map. To capture one, you'll also need to buy greens to feed it, so it doesn't run away during battle. Man, I'm starting to think the Midgar Zulum was placed by these guys intentionally. The best choice is Curial Greens, which keep a Chocobo occupied for 5 turns. In battle, you need to defeat any monsters that appear with the Chocobo without harming it. Once the fight is over, the Chocobo becomes your mount, allowing you to outrun the Zulum and avoid random battles. Unfortunately, you lose your feathery friend as soon as you dismount, but later in the game, a side quest lets you keep multiple Chocobos, breed them, and even use them in races. Before entering the Mithril Mine, there's a brief scene where the party finds a Midgar Zulum impaled on a tree. Did Sephiroth do this? The journey through the mine is short, with the most notable event being another encounter with the Turks. You'll meet Mr. Worldwide himself, Reno, their newest recruit Elena, and Seng will reappear, who informs you they're now tracking Sephiroth and plan to impede your progress. Well, at least their assholes are being upfront about it. Once you exit the mine, Junon is just to the west. To the south is Fort Condor, an optional location where you can play a strategy minigame to defend the fort from Shinra troops. Honestly, it's not great. You need gil to play each time, with at least 4,000 gil required on your first visit. The minigame involves buying troops with different strengths and abilities, placing them strategically to fend off Shinra's forces. If Shinra reaches the top, your party must fight a boss, which can be tough depending on when you tackle the minigame. The biggest issue? It's painfully slow, even if you choose to speed up the gameplay. And even when you're winning, it feels like it drags on forever. I prefer the Rebirth version of the minigame, as it improves it significantly, streamlining the mechanics and speeding things up. Completing the first battle now nets you a magic comb for red, and future visits offer more rewards. But it's not really worth returning until you're required to in Disc 2. Something that is worth doing right now is recruiting the game's first secret character. Running around the forest outside Junon, there's a 12.5% chance of getting into an encounter with a mysterious ninja. Defeat her and you're taken to a scene in the field with her knocked out. Check up on her and say the wrong thing, or try to use the save point nearby, and she'll steal some of your gil and run off. Choose the right responses when speaking to her, and she'll join the party, introducing herself as Yuffie. Pre-equipped with throw materia that lets her toss items at enemies combined with her high dexterity and luck stat, Yuffie is our unofficial thief class character, which means she makes the best use of the steal materia during this portion of the game. Her weapons mainly consist of boomerangs and giant shurikens that, like Barret, allow her to attack from long range. Her limit breaks don't have a consistent theme across them, but mostly allow her to attack individual or multiple foes several times each. Hailing from the far-off land of Wutai, she's mischievous, materia-obsessed, and sometimes a little annoying due to being the youngest in the group at 16. Sharing the main party's hatred for Shinra due to what they did to her homeland during the war, Yuffie is a surprisingly well-rounded and developed character. The game even gets a lot of mileage out of milking her motion sickness for gags if you recruit her early. Both she and our other secret character weren't meant to be optional characters, and were almost cut completely from Final Fantasy VII in order to get it finished in time. So to keep them in, their roles were reduced considerably and they became secret characters. That said, Yuffie actually does keep most of her story importance and feels like a natural part of the group. That's mostly thanks to Jun Akiyama's strong attachment to her, as he was the one in charge of the story and events for Yuffie and Red 13. He had devised a lot of bigger moments for her, especially with her optional side quests, so the team thought it would be a waste to scrap all of it. Alrighty, next stop, Junon. Upon arriving in town, Cloud immediately notices how run down the small village is. This is actually under Junon, once a peaceful fishing village until Shinra built the massive Junon military installation nearby. Now the quaint village is trapped in its shadow, with polluted waters and broken dreams, much like the relationship between Midgar and its slums. I'm going to do a little speedrunning here, but to reach Junon, the party heads to the beach, where they meet a girl named Priscilla, playing with her dolphin friend, Mr. Dolphin. They're soon attacked by a sea monster, leading to a boss battle. After the fight, Cloud revives Priscilla through a CPR minigame. Grateful, she rewards the party the next day with the Shiva summon Materia. With Mr. Dolphin's help, and after another minigame, Cloud is launched out to a platform and sneaks into Junon. Ooh, what a sweet airship. Hope I get to ride it one day. Disguising himself as a Shinra grunt, Cloud unexpectedly finds himself participating in a parade, celebrating Rufus Shinra's inauguration as the new president. This involves yet another minigame, where Cloud must march in line with the other soldiers on live TV, Depending on your performance, you can earn random items or a good chunk of gil. After a brief scene with Rufus and Heidegger, you're free to explore Junon until the next minigame. During your exploration, you can buy new equipment or materia, encounter the Turks again, and pick up another enemy skill materia at the Know-It-All Inn. Eventually, you reach the other end of Junon, where a cargo ship is docked. Here, you'll engage in a Simon Says style minigame, performing a military routine for Rufus. If you knock his socks off, you'll reward Cloud with the Force Stealer Sword, which doubles the growth rate of the materia equipped to it. So I wasn't sure where to bring this up, but a common criticism I see leveled at Final Fantasy VII is that it has too many minigames. Despite the Junon section being almost entirely minigames, I kinda have to disagree with that criticism. Yeah, the game does have a lot of minigames, but many critics suggest they interrupt and distract from the main experience, which I don't really see. Most minigames are spaced out enough that they don't feel intrusive, and while they may not be particularly deep or challenging, even the clunky ones are over quickly, except for Fort Condor, obviously. The minigames that do have some effort behind them do offer some decent rewards. Honestly, I find most of them fun and a refreshing way to break up the combat, and some even help to mix up the exploration in dungeons. Are they as enjoyable as side activities in other Final Fantasy games like Triple Triad, Blitzball, or the new Queen's Blood card game in Rebirth? Nope. Would the game be fine without them? Yeah, probably. But do I consider them a negative? Not at all. Honestly, I would have killed for some dumb minigames in Final Fantasy XVI, because good god does that game just feel so sterile. Like, I enjoyed the game, but its combat is really all it has going for it. But yeah, I think the minigames are fine. Boarding the cargo ship, the rest of our party snuck on board already, by taking disguises too. Running around to gather up the crew, the ship will come under attack, and heading below deck to confront the assailant, Cloud will be reunited with Sephiroth. It's a brief reunion though, as our old buddy barely recognizes him, and declares the time is now before zooming away, and tossing a piece of Genova at us that morphs into Genova Birth for a boss fight. Not a tough boss battle, but after defeating it, we'll get the Ifrit summoned materia. With Sephiroth's reappearance creating more questions than it answered, the cargo ship will arrive on the eastern continent in the tropical paradise of Costa del Sol. Not much to do here, outside of buying new equipment, and an optional encounter with Professor Hojo. He apparently resigned from Shinra and is just chilling on the beach with some ladies. I have no idea why, but maybe they're just gold diggers or something. Entering the world map, the only way forward is Mount Corel. A nice man we encounter on the way, confirming he spotted a man fitting Sephiroth's description heading this way. Ascending the mountain and passing by its broken Mako reactor, we'll arrive at North Corel. The locals immediately recognize Baird and give him a hard time, accusing him of being responsible for the state their town is in and for ruining their lives. He's silent about the whole thing until we reach the gondola out of town. Baird accepts the blame that's thrown at him, as his actions led to his original home of Corel being destroyed and its people being displaced. Corel was a small coal mining town where people were happy, but struggling to get by. Till one day, Scarlet from Shinra approached the residents with the opportunity to sell the mines and approve the construction of a Mako reactor. Baird and all the villagers were on board, with the only one opposed being his best friend Dine, though eventually Barrett would convince him too. Then, sometime after the construction of the Mako reactor, Shinra killed everyone in the village and burned it to the ground. Baird and Dine were spared due to being out of town at the time, but they lost everything. Their friends, their family, which includes Barrett's wife Myrna, who I think was only ever mentioned during this section. There was an accident at the reactor, with Shinra blaming it on the townsfolk, claiming some rebel faction was involved in sabotaging the reactor. I always misremembered what happened to Corel, as I assumed Shinra destroyed the town and its people to cover up the accident that happened at the reactor. But Before Crisis and other expanded materials does confirm what Barrett says, and reveals the ones responsible for blowing up the reactor in the first place were the first iteration of Avalanche. So in a rather ironic twist, Barrett took up the name and mission of the organization partially responsible for the destruction of his home, though it was just some random rebel faction in the original, and I have no idea if Barrett actually learns Avalanche was involved at all. This is what I was referring to who knows how long ago in the video, about how his mission against Shinra was personal, with the goal of saving the planet more of a secondary goal in Barrett's quest for revenge. Well, that's some rough shit, buddy, but you know what'll cheer you up? A trip to the greatest amusement park in the world, the Gold Saucer. Man, the tonal whiplash of learning about Barrett's past to immediately going to this world's version of Disney World is insane. Also, considering the only way into the Gold Saucer is from the gondola in North Corel, how are these people not doing better? Feels like they could make a killing offering cheap lodging and hotels for visitors trying to avoid staying in the expensive park. Maybe they're all too sad to think of a good fiscal plan to rebuild their livelihoods. There's probably one person in the comments writing a whole dissertation about how local towns and businesses are actually worse off because of their proximity to luxury resorts and theme parks. You're casting pearls before swine, my friend, as I'm a man who thinks anime figures, card packs, and vintage t-shirts are smart financial investments. Man, I love the Golden Saucer. Its catchy tune is like crack for my ears. The place is a fun blend of Disney World, Luigi's Mansion, Dave & Buster's, and your local OTB place. Stay in a spooky hotel, ride a roller coaster, or go on a gondola date. Play a bunch of mini games to win prizes, or just chill by betting on some chocobo races. Though it also does that obnoxious thing where you can't spend your own money, and instead have to buy and spend their fake currency, which in this case is BP. Also, it costs 5 BP if you want to use the save point here, which is just bullshit. I'm not going to go in depth with everything that's available to do here, as half of it isn't unlocked until later, but I've always found the Gold Saucer a fun distraction and break from the main game. I also really love the version of it that appears in Final Fantasy XIV. God, I really want to go back to that game. I was so close to finishing Lightbringers and starting Endwalker. The gang decides to take a break from tracking Sephiroth to blow off some steam. Aerith gets the bright idea to intentionally piss off Barrett, so he'll stop being such a Debbie Downer. Which kinda worked, I guess, since he stopped being mopey and he ran off to do whatever. Exploring the park, you have a choice on who to bring with you, and naturally, I picked best girl Aerith to hang with. Traveling to the Wonder Square, Cloud and Aerith will meet this fortune-telling puppet cat thing riding on top of a stuffed Moogle. This confusing figure is our next party member, Kate Sith. He has a high luck stat and only has 2 limit breaks. The first dice dealing a random amount of damage depending on your dice roll, while his second one, Slots, deals a variety of random effects depending on the outcome of the reels. So he's kinda like the Gambler or Lady Luck Jobs from other Final Fantasy games. And I'll be honest, Kate Sith sucks on so many levels. Like, I know I said earlier in the video that with Materia you can customize each party member to fill whatever role, and that there isn't really a best party lineup, but with only 2 limit breaks with randomized effects, and the fact that his stats are pretty average, he's not reliable in dealing damage or supporting the party like other characters. That, and Kate Sith is extremely underdeveloped, and he doesn't really fit in with the core cast. He just forces his way into the party because he's annoyed about Cloud's fortune. Even after some reveals later in the story, it just doesn't make a lot of sense why he still hangs around. Kate Sith feels way more like a secret optional character you can recruit than Yuffie does, or even Vincent. Well, he's here to stay, and this third wheel seriously sours Cloud's date with Aerith. Don't let it get to you, buddy. Aerith isn't going anywhere. You have plenty of time to shoot your shot. Why not blow off some steam at the battle arena? Ah, well shit. Arriving at the arena, the gang stumbles on several freshly murdered Shinra grunts. But this wasn't Sephiroth's handiwork, as the bodies are riddled with bullets. A survivor says it was a man with a gun for an arm. Gun for an arm, gun for an arm. Nope, can't think of anyone who fits the description. They don't get to ponder the mystery for long, as Gold Saucer security and the theme park's owner, Dio, shows up. Not giving the gang a chance to explain the situation, Dio immediately blames the killings on them, before tossing them down into prison without due process. Our new home is Corel Prison, which is more of a lawless no-man's land bandit town, surrounded by an inescapable desert, than an actual prison. Also, it's only just now that I'm realizing this was the site of Barrett's hometown before Shinra pulled a Nibelheim on it. Speaking to the guy who seemingly runs this place, Mr. Coates, the only way back up the saucer is through the elevator he controls. But to actually win your freedom from the prison, you need to win a chocobo race. But also, the only way he'll let you use the elevator and participate in the race is if his boss gives the okay. Well, that's kind of stupid. I need to use the elevator in the first place to take part in the chocobo race. So couldn't anyone just escape once they got up there? Well, whatever, don't think about it. While wandering around the prison, we'll eventually regroup with the rest of the party, and Barrett, who was trying to avoid the others. He wasn't the one responsible for killing the Shinra grunts above. It was another man with a gun grafted to his arm, his old buddy Dine. During the attack on Corel 4 years ago, Barrett and Dine were ambushed by Shinra and Scarlet when trying to save their home. Precariously dangling from a ledge, Barrett desperately tried to save Dine, but Scarlet opened fire on them. The injuries he sustained would cause Barrett to drop his friend to his supposed death, while permanently crippling his right arm. Sometime later, Barrett would have his useless arm replaced with his current gun arm, and the doctor who did the procedure explained he did the same thing for another person, though it was for his left arm, which leads him to believe Dine survived and is the one responsible for the attack at the Gold Saucer. Barrett wants to deal with his old friend on his own and apologize for what happened, even if it costs him his life. The rest of the gang refuse to let him throw his life away and insist on being there when he finds Dine. We'll find Dine north of the prison, sitting alone and taking random pot shots in the air, whether it was a bump on the noggin from falling hundreds of feet, or succumbing to absolute despair after losing his family and home, or both. But Dine has completely lost it. He's become nihilistic, his rage aimed not just at Shinra, but the entire world. Without his wife or his daughter, there's nothing left for him anymore. But it turns out he didn't lose his daughter. Barrett has been taking care of her this entire time. That's right, Marlene isn't Barrett's daughter, but Dine's. Unfortunately, the guy is too far gone now, as instead of coming to his senses, he wants to kill Marlene so she won't be lonely and can be with her mother in the afterlife. This leads to a short 1v1 boss battle between Barrett and Dine, which manages to knock a little sense back into him. However, he's done too much, killed too many, and doesn't consider himself fit to raise Marlene anymore. Tossing Barrett his wife's locket to pass on to his daughter, Dine tells him to never make Marlene cry, before tossing himself off the side of a cliff. I don't know how I feel about this whole event. I get that Dine is meant to represent what Barrett could have become if he had let his hatred for Shinra consume him, instead of dedicating himself to saving the planet and raising Marlene. But this encounter with Dine feels like it comes and goes in a blink of an eye. From Barrett explaining what happened to his hometown before entering the Gold Saucer to the encounter with Dine, maybe 30 minutes pass, assuming you didn't get sidetracked playing games at the saucer. Honestly, I completely misremembered this whole thing with Dine, and thought it was an optional side quest for Barrett, so it's surprising to replay and realize it's casually dropped into the story right after our first encounter with Sephiroth. This section about Barrett's past and his encounter with Dine feels like it should have been longer, or after the fall of the Sector 7 plate to have more build-up and a better emotional payoff when we discover Dine's still alive. Not bad, but this does lead to a few repetitive story segments where we pause the main goal of chasing Sephiroth to give a member of the team the spotlight and some story focus before returning back to the main plot. I have more to say, but I would rather save it for later after the full party is assembled. After Dine's death, it'll cut to the group speaking to Mr. Coates. They demand to use the elevator and show him Dine's locket as proof he gave the okay. Yeah, turns out Dine was the mysterious boss Coates and some other bandits mentioned, which is kinda confusing, as while several NPCs outright state how afraid of him they are, he's less some tyrant who takes control of the place out of fear, and more some nutso serial killer the rest of the bandits would stay clear the fuck away from. Honestly, Rebirth's version of this chapter makes way more sense in events and characterization. But let's mosey and get things moving again. Cloud gets permission to go up above, and a girl named Esther will be his chocobo manager, and teach him the ropes on how to be a jockey. Also, the remote Materia is here for some reason. The chocobo race is fairly simple, and once you take the lead, as long as you don't push your bird too hard and drain his stamina, you'll win easily. Also, some versions of the game let you mash R1 and R2 to regain stamina, making it even easier. It's nowhere near the nightmare that chocobo racing is in Final Fantasy X. Honestly, I have no idea how they never fixed that with re-releases. After winning the race, Esther will give us a letter written by Dio. Esther informed him that Dine was responsible for the murders, so our team gets a full pardon. Well, better late than never, asshole. Maybe next time check your security footage or hold a trial first. Oh, and he gives us a sweet buggy that will let us cross the desert and over rivers. Now that we have the buggy and the manipulate materia from Kate Sith, we can return to the beaches around Costa del Sol to learn Midgar, return to the eastern continent to learn White Wind, and if you didn't learn that initially, fight the Midgar Zolom to learn Beta. Crossing the river closest to the Gold Saucer, our next stop is
Gongaga.
Gongaga is completely optional to visit, but it's worth it for some story stuff and a reunion with our pal the Turks. You stumble on Reno and Rude discussing who they're into. Reno doesn't say. Rude has a thing for Tifa. Elena apparently has a thing for their boss Seng, and Seng likes Aerith, which I wasn't sure if it's meant to imply he has a romantic attraction to her, or simply that he cares for her. Initially, I thought he was a grown adult when he met Aerith as a kid. As shown in Elmira's flashback, Seng uses the same model he does now, which is, problematic if he was an adult when he first met her and his feelings are meant to be romantic. But apparently Seng is like 7 years older than Aerith, so he was a teenager when they first met, and since Seng's been keeping an eye on her ever since she escaped the lab, he might have developed a soft spot for Aerith, and grew to see her like a little sister. It would also explain why they never captured her during that time. I don't remember Crisis Core delving that much into their relationship, so unless it's expanded on in some obscure supplementary material, or before Crisis, I'm going to assume he just cares for her and that's it. Oh, and while I hyper-fixated on this and looked up everyone's birthdays, I learned Aerith is a year older than Cloud, which means Aerith is the type of girl Cloud's mom would have wanted for him in the first place. Oh yeah, point 1 to Clareth shippers. Suck on that, Cloudy shippers. Also, why is the Cloud and Tifa ship Cloudy and not Khalifa? I also learned that I'm going to be the same age as Barrett in 7 months, which, man, where did all that time go? So anyways, we fight Reno and Rude. The group realizes they were followed and wonder if there's a spy in their midst. They visit the destroyed Gongaga reactor, spot Scarlet and Seng looking for something called Huge Materia. The party inspects the reactor to grab the Titan Summon Materia, and run into the greatest enemy in the game, the Heavy Tank, aka Tankceratops. It's an absolute travesty he didn't reappear in Rebirth. Really ruined the entire experience for me. Entering the tiny village of Gongaga, there isn't much here. Speaking to the villagers at the graveyard, you'll find out that when the reactor exploded 3 years ago, it killed several people. Surprised Shinra didn't try to cover it up in some way, to be honest. But maybe this far out from Midgar, there wasn't really a need to. The only other thing of note is if we enter this house on the right when we first entered the town. The older couple inside recognize Cloud is a part of Soldier because of his Mako-infused eyes. They ask him if he knows anything about their son Zack. He left 10 years ago to join Soldier, and haven't heard from him since. Cloud doesn't recall the name, but Aerith does, and she'll leave abruptly when the couple ask if she was Zack's girlfriend that he wrote about. Speaking with her, she confirms Zack was the first love she mentioned back in Sector 5, and that he was Soldier First Class like Cloud. Still, despite how difficult it is to achieve that rank, Cloud can't recall ever hearing about Zack. Last time Aerith saw him was 5 years ago when he left for a mission, and due to his ladies' man persona, she assumed he moved on and found someone else. Which sounds more like she's in denial that something could have happened to him, especially if you choose to say poor guy when given the option on how to reply to Aerith. Done with Gongaga, our next stop is Cosmo Canyon. Cosmo Canyon is the center for the study of planet life, or planetology, a philosophy and set of beliefs that studies the relationship between life and the planet, and the flow of the life stream. This portion of the story gives focus to Red 13, who I barely used up until this point, as I usually chose Yuffie for the party over him, if I wasn't using Barrett or Tifa as my third. Running up the stairs, the pooch happily speaks to the guard, and we learn that his real name is Nanaki. He asks us to follow him so we can meet his grandfather, an elderly human named Bugenhagen. The old guy thanks us for taking care of Red 13, and reveals that our canine companion is 48 years old. Despite being older than everyone else in the party, because his species lives so long and matures slowly, Nanaki would be the equivalent of a teenager in terms of mental maturity. Which, yeah, isn't something you really pick up on through his dialogue at all. Maybe in Japanese his manner of speaking makes it more obvious, but now I get why Rebirth went the way it did with him to foreshadow it. Bugenhagen is the foremost expert on planetology, and he'll put on a planetarium laser show to teach the party about its basics. I kinda already went over it, but all living things on the planet are born with spirit energy from the life stream. When they die, that energy returns to the planet, and the life stream uses it to create new life. Due to Mako energy being created through harvesting that spirit energy from the life stream, it disrupts the natural circle of life, which will eventually lead to the death of the planet if Mako production continues. Despite the very obvious parallels to climate change, Final Fantasy VII's central theme isn't about environmentalism, and is actually about life. According to series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, he wanted to explore the concept of life through a mathematical and more logical lens, in hopes of dealing with the mental shock of his mother passing away during the development of Final Fantasy III, or Final Fantasy VI, the interview where he says it doesn't clarify which version he's talking about. But Final Fantasy VII explores the concept of life in a much broader sense. The game's theme draws from the Japanese word enochi, which is an abstract idea that emphasizes life as a living entity, a being's life force or spirit as a tangible essence that forms their fundamental core. It reflects on how experiences shape who we are, how our lives impact everything and everyone around us, how we leave an impression after we're gone, and how all these connections define us as individuals. While the concept of the life stream does carry an environmentalist message, It's more about embodying the idea of life as a tangible force that connects all living things. This theme of life also nicely ties into the struggles some of our characters face as they try to understand their purpose in the world and discover their true selves. After our field trip to the planetarium is over, Cloud will head outside and sit around the bonfire with the others. Speaking with Barrett, he's still carrying a lot of guilt over the deaths of Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge. He promised one day that after their mission of stopping Shinra was done, he'd come here to Cosmo Canyon to celebrate. While unsure of himself, Barrett decides he needs to keep going for their sakes, and so their deaths aren't meaningless. Speaking with Tifa, she's struggling with opening up to Cloud, unable to discuss what happened 5 years ago in Nibelheim. She feels like they're so distant and disconnected from each other. Tifa rather cryptically asking Cloud if he really is Cloud. There's a lot to unpack there, but we can't really touch on that just yet. Speaking with Aerith, the elders here taught her a lot about the Cetra and the Promised Land. This has left her feeling depressed and lonely, as the realization she's the last of her kind has finally hit her. And while Cloud tries to reassure Aerith that she has him and the others, that she isn't alone because she has her friends, it's not enough as she remains silent. Kate Sith and Yuffie have nothing of value to say, but speaking to Red 13, he'll finally open up about himself. He begins speaking about how he used to sit around the same fire with his parents before abruptly stopping. His parents were the previous guardians of Cosmo Canyon, and while he looks upon his mother's memory with love and joy, he becomes overwhelmed with anger when thinking of his father. Red claims that his father was a coward who abandoned the village and his mother when their enemies, the Gi tribe, attacked. Old man Bugenhagen shows up after overhearing that Red still hasn't forgiven his father, and tells him there's something he needs to see. Tagging along with Red, the old man will lead the group through a passage he had sealed off. Inside are the vengeful spirits of the Gi, who were unable to pass on to the livestream when they died during a certain battle. The passage leads to the back of Cosmo Canyon, and Bugenhagen tells the story of a warrior who fought alone to stop the Gi from passing through. At the end of the passage, we're thrown into a boss fight against the leader of the Gi, Gi Natak, who I easily dispatch by tossing an X potion at him. It's probably more commonplace now than it ever was, but I love when RPGs let you kill undead with healing magic and items. Reaching the end of the passage, we learn the identity of the mysterious warrior who saved Cosmo Canyon. Spoilers, it was Red's father, Seto, who valiantly fought and pushed the Gi out of the canyon. This came at the cost of his life, as the Gi's poison arrows turned him to stone, leaving him unable to return home to his wife and son. Actually, is he dead? Like, if they used the soft on him, that would unpetrify him, right? Or would he just bleed out since there's still plenty of arrows sticking out of him? Probably best not to think about it. Bugenhagen explains that Red's mother knew that Seto went to protect the passage, and both of them asked the old man to seal the entrance. I thought it was because of all the Gi ghosts haunting the place, but it was probably more a tactical idea, so no one could use that entrance to attack the canyon again. Feels like someone should have told Red though, and not have him resent his father for who knows how long. But Bugenhagen comments on how much stronger and mature Red had become after the Gi Natak fight, so they all probably thought that due to his age he might carelessly try to reopen the passage in some vain attempt to save Seto. Which is fair enough, that makes sense. Bugenhagen asks Red to stick with the party, as while he and the other planetologists long ago resigned to the fact the planet dying is just fate, he can at least try to do something about it, right? If social media was a thing back in 1997, planetologists would absolutely be that one friend who thinks raising awareness about a cause is the same as actually doing something about it. But whatever, let's go save the planet. And with that, Red Spotlight's story is over. It was nice to actually flesh out our canine companion, as he's been pretty quiet and done close to nothing up to this point. But like Barrett's story, it has the same issue of being resolved as soon as it's introduced. Also, Red 13 ends up fading back into the background after this too, so he still ends up feeling really underdeveloped by the end of the game. Alright, let's mosey and make our way back to Cloud and Tifa's hometown. Arriving in Nibelheim, Cloud and Tifa immediately sense something is off. The town, which should be in ruins, looks exactly as it did before Sephiroth destroyed it. When they ask the villagers, they claim they've lived there their whole lives, and accuse Cloud and Tifa of lying about the past. While it might seem like a twist that Cloud and Tifa have false memories, the truth is that Shinra rebuilt the town and populated it with people to cover up Sephiroth's actions. However, something new in the town are the strange figures in black cloaks, each bearing a numbered tattoo and muttering about a reunion. Due to the limited graphics, I thought they were some kind of worm or slime before I realized who they were. After exploring the town, the party heads to the Shinra mansion and descends to the secret basement to find Sephiroth just chillin'. He asks Cloud if he'll join the reunion, revealing that Jenova was the original calamity from the sky that wiped out the Cetra, and the reunion will recreate that calamity somehow. Contrary to what Sephiroth originally believed, he and Jenova were never Cetra. He doesn't elaborate further or explain his new goal before tossing some materia at Cloud and disappearing. It's a bit goofy, but the materia, destruct materia, might be a hint that Sephiroth plans to bring destruction to the world. Or maybe he's just messing with Cloud. Given Sephiroth's obsession with tormenting Cloud in other media, he might have just thrown it to be a dick. The chase after Sephiroth continues, but before leaving, it's time to recruit our second secret character. In the secret basement is a locked door, and the key is in a safe upstairs. To open the safe, you have to solve riddles left on a post-it note. Or you could just look up the combination online. Unlocking the safe triggers a boss battle with a creature called Lost Number. It changes forms to become immune to either magic or physical damage, depending on which type you use most against it. It's not too tough, especially since it's vulnerable to poison, so you can chip away at it even if you're underleveled. Once the door in the basement is unlocked, you'll find a lone coffin. Inside is a gloomy guy who's annoyed you disturbed his sleep, but perks up when Cloud mentions Sephiroth. After hearing about your history with Sephiroth, and that he's discovered his true origins, the man introduces himself as Vincent Valentine, a former Turk. Vincent then asks Cloud about a woman named Lucretia. Cloud doesn't know her, but she was the woman Vincent loved, Professor Hojo's assistant, and Sephiroth's mother. Lucretia helped Hojo with the Jenova project, using her unborn child as a test subject to inject Jenova cells. There's so much more I want to say about Lucretia, but I'll save that for later. As for Vincent, man, I can't help but feel so bad for him. The cuts made to the game to ship it on time hurt his character the most. Experimented on by Shinra, Vincent, despite being almost 60 years old, physically looks like a badass 20-something. He fights with a variety of guns, has a high magic stat, making him a reliable spellcaster, and his limit break allows him to transform into different creatures with their own abilities for a few turns, which kinda makes him like Gao from Final Fantasy VI. Unfortunately, despite how cool his transformations are, Vincent becomes uncontrollable when his limit break is active. This makes his transformations very situational and unreliable, as he might use moves that are worthless against certain opponents. Additionally, Vincent ends up being the least developed of all the characters, as the optional side quest that explores his backstory is painfully short compared to the others. It's probably why I'm so apologetic when it comes to Dirge of Cerberus, as despite the game's quality, at least my emo vampire buddy gets his time in the sun to shine. Maybe I do a Dirge of Cerberus review in the future? Huh? Comment down below and let me know. Leaving the mansion, we'll follow Sephiroth's trail up to Mount Nibel, and after getting through the mountain, we'll be greeted with a boss fight against the Materia Keeper, who you absolutely shouldn't have Vincent use his Galleon Beast limit break on, as his fire attack will heal the boss and extend the fight. Come on, Final Fantasy VII, I just wanted to show my boy some love. Why'd you have to make the literal next boss fight a bad pick to use him on? Exiting the mountain, the buggy doesn't magically teleport to this side, and so we have to hoof it to the next location, Rocket Town. Can you guess why it's called that? The town was once the site of Shinra's budding space exploration program, but after a failed launch and a bigger focus on Mako, the whole idea of traveling to space was abandoned. However, with President Shinra 6 feet under, his son Rufus has shown some interest in reviving the space program. Exploring the town, the group will stumble upon a small plane called the Tiny Bronco, and Cloud thinks it's cool. And there's just something so funny about how matter-of-fact the line is. Like he's a little kid seeing a plane in the sky. A woman named Shira will inform the group if they want to use the plane, they should ask its captain, who is up in the rocket preparing it for Shinra's arrival. Climbing up there, we're introduced to the final member of our party, Sid Highwind. Sid is a pilot and former Shinra engineer, whose dreams of becoming an astronaut were dashed when Shinra canceled the space program. He's short-tempered, foul-mouthed, even more so than Barrett, and a little too verbally abusive to his assistant Shira. But he's a good guy at heart. Mostly. Sid fights with spears, and his limit breaks usually have him jumping up high in the air before slamming down to attack enemies, making him similar to the Dragoon class of other Final Fantasy games. Fun fact, that's the class I chose when I started Final Fantasy XIV. His stats also make him a solid physical attacker, so Sid is a pretty solid guy to keep on the team. The story thinks so too, as he's decently fleshed out and participates more in the plot, compared to Red, Kate Sith, and Vincent. I like Sid, but I don't know if I'd put him in my top 5 Sids from Final Fantasy. FF12 Sid, FF14 Sid, and Final Fantasy X Sid are hard to top. And 15 should have made Cindy its Sid, instead of pussying out and making Sid her grandfather instead. Not like he does much in that game, honestly. Heading back to Sid's house, it turns out he and Shira live together, though they aren't married, or even dating. To be honest, it's really uncomfortable how he berates her in front of everyone. I think it's because it feels a little too real, you know? Like, have you ever seen a stranger just berate their partner or kids in public? Or watch some Karen yell at a retail employee? Like, it's awkward and uncomfortable. You watch it escalate and you're not sure if it's going to get physical or not. Like, I was expecting Cloud to step in and say something, but everyone's quiet. The party does mention it after he leaves. Cowards. But Shira excuses his behavior, saying it's because she cost him his dream. Shira was responsible for prepping the rocket Sid was going to take into space, and she was meticulous in ensuring all the equipment was functional, which, if you know anything about launching rockets, is actually a good thing. As Sid began the ignition sequence, Shira was still in the engine room checking the oxygen tanks. Then the launch initiated and the countdown began. Sid begged her to get out of there before it was too late, but she was determined to ensure the rocket was safe, even at the cost of her own life. With only moments left, Sid activated the emergency abort system, stopping the launch and saving Shira's life. As a side note, the other engineers told him to forget about her and proceed with the launch, which, yikes, you guys are assholes. Blaming herself for costing Sid his dream, Shira endures his verbal abuse because she believes she owes him for saving her life. Like, I get it, and Sid is never shown to be physically abusive, but there's a limit to how much you let someone walk all over you, you know? Anywho, Palmer, the executive director of Shinra's space program, soon shows up, along with Rufus Shinra. As it turns out, they're not looking to revive the space program. They spotted Sephiroth crossing the sea to a different continent and want to borrow the tiny Bronco to follow him. Wait, how does Shinra Inc. with its huge military not have another plane or flying vehicle they can use? It doesn't really make any sense. And all I can think of is maybe Shinra didn't want to waste their own equipment in the off chance Sephiroth spots them and attacks. Or it's just the game's clunky way of telling us where to look for Sephiroth next, and that we need the tiny Bronco to do it. Probably that one. Shira warns us that Palmer is trying to steal the plane and we'll get into a boss battle with him. He's not even remotely a threat, and the fight just randomly ends with him getting hit by a truck and sent flying. Well, alright then. Our heroes will hijack and fly off on the tiny Bronco, picking up Sid along the way. The plane gets damaged by Shinra troops opening fire on the party, causing the plane to crash into the water. It's too damaged to take to the skies, but it will let us travel around the shallow waters of the ocean. Cloud asks Sid what he's going to do next, since he's done with Shinra, and has been wanting to leave Rocket Town forever now. He says screw it, and decides to join up with the party in their search of Sephiroth. He also fills in the others that when speaking to Rufus, he said Sephiroth was heading for the Temple of the Ancients, vaguely hinting that it's in the opposite direction of where we last followed him. Now, with the tiny Bronco in our possession, we have a few options on what to do next. First, we're now able to do Yuffie's Spotlight story / side quest, and return to our homeland of Wutai. Though it's actually better to do that after we visit the Temple of the Ancients, as the equipment we find there helps make the side quest in Wutai more manageable. If we decide to head for the temple, we won't be able to enter without a special keystone, so let's go look for that. Directly south of the Gold Saucer is a small house with a weapons seller inside. He used to be in possession of the keystone, but sold it to the owner of the Gold Saucer, Dio. You don't have to visit this guy, and can head straight to the Gold Saucer if you already know the keystone is there. He also gives us a hint on what Sephiroth might want at the Temple of the Ancients, as he heard legends that it houses the ultimate destruction magic. And he's part of a side quest we'll circle back to in a few. Returning to the Gold Saucer, we'll find the keystone in Dio's storeroom, but he's only willing to cough it up if Cloud participates in the battle square. The square has you choose a party member to fight in 8 continuous fights to earn BP, with the enemies they fight changing depending on what point in the story you return. In between each round, you'll spin a slot reel to apply a random handicap to the fight, with the stronger the handicap increasing the amount of BP you can earn. Though if you die during a round, you'll earn nothing. Despite its randomness, with the right materia and equipment, you can manage the square relatively well, and even avoid the effects of certain handicaps. And the BP you earn can be used to buy some really good items of materia, if you're willing to grind for it. Thankfully, Dio doesn't actually need you to win the 8 rounds, so just participating is enough to get the keystone. Unfortunately, the party won't be able to leave the Gold Saucer, as the gondola is down for maintenance, so they decide to spend the night at the Ghost Hotel. On Katesit's insistence, Cloud will go over what happened so far and their plan to find Sephiroth to all the newcomers in the group. He goes over Sephiroth's search for the Promised Land, and Aerith chimes in that it's not exactly a physical place, and that you can sort of feel where it is when you're close, admitting she sort of does sense it. They go over Sephiroth's other goal of obtaining the ultimate destruction magic or the black materia, along with bringing up the strange men in black cloaks with tattoos. They're unsure what their purpose is in all of this, but believe Hojo experimented on them for some reason. Oh yeah, I forgot where it was explained, probably Nibelheim, but the guys in black robes were Hojo's doing. Red 13 briefly wonders if his tattoo means he's part of the plan, but he's just an unrelated experiment. Aerith is about to mention one more thing, but decides against it and abruptly leaves to go to bed. The rest of the party will do the same, and in the middle of the night, Cloud will get woken up to go on a date at the saucer. So I've been saving this until this moment, but remember how I brought up the importance of Cloud's dialogue choices? Well, the game has a hidden relationship meter, which, depending on what you choose to say to members of your party during certain scenes, will add or remove relationship points to those party members. Those characters are Aerith, Tifa, Yuffie, and Barret. However, they all start with different relationship values when joining the party. The game heavily favoring Aerith since she has the highest at 50 points, Tifa in second at 30, Yuffie at 10, and Barret with 0 points. Since there's nothing in the game that tells you about this mechanic, or your standing with each party member, the majority of players will end up with Aerith as their date unless they look up a guide. And I love that. Think about it. How often do you really think about what you say to someone? Do you ever really know what you said was the right thing to say? Is the right thing to say really what you should say? How often have you said something inconsequential, only for someone to take it the wrong way? As a YouTuber, I've found that I do that quite often now that I think about it. Probably offended someone with some random take forever ago in this video. It's a more realistic take on the romance mechanics found in other games, where you often have to shower a character with positivity, attention, and gifts to win their affection, and you have some way to actively track where the relationship value is. Here, it's not about winning a girlfriend by doing and saying all the right things, but just building relationships by being yourself. And while there is a hint of romance, granted a one-sided one coming from the girls, the actions and dialogue change based on who Cloud spends time with. If you followed a guide to make Barret's relationship with Cloud the highest, because let's be honest, you're not stumbling upon this by accident, he just wants to hang out with Cloud. Their date is shorter than the ones with the girls, and Barret mostly teases Cloud, saying he should have asked one of the girls onto the gondola. He also thinks of Marlene and wishes he could show her the fireworks at the saucer. If Cloud ends up with one of the girls, they first visit the event square and get chosen to act in a play being put on. Yuffie is the most forward about her crush on Cloud, pushing him to keep her company. During the gondola ride, she even kisses him, leaving Cloud speechless, and Yuffie embarrassed since he doesn't react. It's either because he's an awkward dork, or probably due to the age difference between them. If Cloud ends up with Tifa, she spends the date shyly trying to work up the courage to confess her feelings to him. Aerith's feelings are a bit more ambiguous, and serve as foreshadowing for a later reveal. She playfully teases Cloud before dragging him out of his room, and during the gondola ride, she abruptly brings up how similar Cloud is to her ex, Zack. She's bewildered by how two completely different people can share so many similarities. Initially seeing Zack and Cloud, or wanting to, Aerith realizes Cloud is different. She feels different now, and is eager to meet the real Cloud. Aerith wants him to open up to her. After the gondola date, Cloud and whoever his date is will catch Kate Sith trying to run off with the keystone. Chasing after him all over the gold saucer, he'll hand the stone to Sang before revealing he's been a spy for Shinra this entire time. He also reveals that he's just a remote-controlled puppet, and his real body is back in Midgar. Despite the fact he just betrayed us, this asshole has the audacity to ask Cloud to look the other way and treat things like they're normal. And when that rightfully doesn't work, he reveals he has Marlene hostage somewhere. And it's all just so stupid. The reveal that Kate Sith was the spy isn't too surprising, as he forced his way into the party for the flimsiest of reasons, so there was clearly something up when we met him. The game tries to frame it as if they had no choice but to keep Kate Sith around, but why would he want to stick around in the first place? He was exposed, and managed to steal the keystone for Shinra. It would have made way more sense to get the hell out of there. Kate Sith can't realistically keep spying on the party anymore, as they'd keep him at arm's length now that they know his true nature. And when the party does find out who he really is, it still doesn't make the most sense they'd trust him. Especially for Barret, who feels like he and the others would prioritize finding Marlene, instead of listening to Kate Sith since he's a Shinra lackey. But whatever, next stop, the Temple of the Ancients. Now before heading to the temple, there is one side quest we have to do now, otherwise it's permanently lost forever, and that's unlocking Aerith's Tier 4 limit break, Great Gospel. Once a character has all their limit breaks unlocked up to level 3, to unlock their final one, they need a special item specific to them to unlock it. For Aerith, we have to head all the way back to Junon while riding the buggy, and head east across the river to this small cave. Inside is a sleeping man. If you speak to him, he'll tell you the number of battles you've fought up to this point. If the last 2 digits in the number of battles ends in the same odd numbers, like 199 or 255, he'll give you the mithril key item. If you don't meet the requirements, just run outside and keep getting into fights until you do. Next, we'll head all the way back to the weapon seller south of the Gold Saucer, give him the mithril, and he'll let you have an item from 2 chests in his house. Go up to the one on the 2nd floor to get Great Gospel. Then use it on Aerith, and boom, she's unlocked her final limit break. Great Gospel completely heals the party's HP, MP, and makes them temporarily immune to all attacks. While extremely powerful, you're about to see it won't end up being a huge game changer for the rest of the game. Heading to the Temple of the Ancients, Aerith can hear the voices of the planet speaking to her and trying to tell her something. The party will stumble on another one of those black robe guys, and inside the temple, they find Seng seemingly fatally injured. He says he was attacked by Sephiroth, and that they were wrong about him looking for the Promised Land. Seng will hand the party the keystone to enter the main temple, with he and Aerith sharing a few words. She's a mix of emotions, as while she and Seng aren't friends, he's known her longer than most people, and is one of the few people who know her true self. Spoilers I guess, but the game heavily implies that Seng does die here, as he isn't seen or mentioned later in the game, but Advent Children confirms he survives, and some short stories set between the game and the movie explain how he lived. So yay, I guess. Entering the temple, the party will spot this little wizard guy and chase him around a maze until they corner him. He's a spirit body of the Ancients that separated itself from the lifestream in order to protect the temples, I think. He's unable to speak, but Aerith senses it's afraid due to Sephiroth being here. The little guy also serves as an item shop, inn, and a save point, all in one. Continuing through the maze, we'll spot another Ancient, but have to cross through these rolling pillars to reach him, which might take you a while to do, as the pattern to run and safely hide under a rolling cylinder is inconsistent, which needs you to run back and forth to nail the timing. After successfully disabling the trap, Aerith will interact with a pool of purple water. It's the consciousness of the Ancients. It shows the group a vision of what happened earlier when Sen was attacked. Sephiroth explains that his grand plan is to merge with the planet, absorb all of its energy and knowledge to become an all-powerful being. The next area is a large chamber resembling a clock that requires you to move the large hour and minute hands in order to find the right exit. Depending on what door you go through, you can find items or equipment like Aerith's ultimate weapon, the Princess Card, or get thrown into enemy encounters. After finding the exit and chasing around another ancient spirit body, the party will find the room with hieroglyphics where Seng was attacked by Sephiroth, and Mama's boy is still here waiting for the party. He gloats about his ultimate plan, explaining that the planet uses spirit energy from the lifestream in order to heal itself. Sephiroth's plan to merge with the planet is to inflict an injury to it so devastating, it could destroy the whole world. And when the planet summons that energy, he'll be at the center of it to absorb the energy, become one with the planet, and ascend to godhood. And to pull it off, he'll use the ultimate destruction magic of the black materia, Meteor. Sephiroth then flies off and the scene shifts to Cloud losing it and laughing in front of the mural of the meteor. Ignoring what Aerith and Tifa are saying to him, he just laughs and mutters something about the black materia until he finally comes back to his senses. Oblivious to what just happened, the girls stay quiet and don't tell him, and immediately afterwards the group is attacked. Not by Sephiroth or another Jenova piece, but a red dragon, which is presumably guarding the black materia. After defeating it, the pedestal that was behind it will display a hologram of the black materia. Aerith will ask the voices of the ancients where the materia is, and they explain that the entire temple is the black materia. In order to use it, they would need to solve a series of puzzles that will cause the black materia to shrink until it can fit in the palm of their hands. The only trade-off is the puzzles have to be solved inside the temple, meaning whoever is inside will get crushed to death. Cloud insists they find a way to shrink and claim the materia, as Sephiroth has plenty of disposable flunkies he could use to get the materia for himself. Cait Sith immediately calls up and offers to be the one to stay behind in the temple. As a remote-controlled puppet, he isn't actually alive and is easily replaceable. They'll meet up with them at the entrance of the temple and give Aerith and Cloud one last fortune to see how compatible the two of them are. Spoilers, they're perfect for each other, and he predicts a great future for the two of them. Cait Sith will say his final goodbyes, and the game really tries its hardest to play his sacrifice straight, with some sappy music playing, him struggling to move properly, and reminiscing on his time with the party. But how could anyone possibly be sad to see him die? Cait Sith did absolutely jack shit before he betrayed the party. He's not actually a living creature. So unless the game is implying it gained its own will and sentience, it just does nothing for me. Unless it's meant to be subversive and the guy controlling Cait Sith is intentionally being melodramatic, which would be absolutely hilarious. Either way, his sacrifice is in vain, as Sephiroth immediately shows up and takes the Black Materia. To activate it and summon Meteor, Sephiroth needs a place filled with spirit energy, and he's found it. The Promised Land. Thanks to his time absorbing the knowledge of the Ancients within the livestream. He commands Cloud to wake up, and despite Cloud's struggles against it, and his inner self trying to stop him, he ends up handing over the Black Materia to Sephiroth. As Sephiroth flies off, Cloud has a mental breakdown, unable to comprehend why he was compelled to give up the Black Materia. When Aerith tries to calm him down, Cloud lashes out, shoving her to the ground. He then continues to hit Aerith, which, due to how their models are positioned, make it look like he's hitting her feet, or the ground in front of her. But her model does react to his first couple of hits, so, yeah, he's most likely attacking Aerith. That said, Cloud isn't in control, as his inner self is still present and trying to stop his body. Cait Sith 2 arrives, and Tifa jumps down to stop Cloud, causing him to lose consciousness. Cloud then dreams of a forest where he speaks with Aerith, and apologizes for what happened. She forgives him, tells him she knows it's not his fault, to focus on getting better, and that she'll deal with Sephiroth. Aerith is heading to the City of the Ancients to find a way to stop him, running off toward the light as Cloud desperately tries to follow, only for the dream to abruptly end when Sephiroth appears. Cloud wakes up in Gongaga with Tifa and Barret by his side. Aerith has run off, and the rest of the party is out searching for her. Cloud reveals where she went, but refuses to join the group. He's completely broken, terrified of how easily Sephiroth controlled him, and the dangers he poses to his friends. Barret gives him some tough love, telling him that sitting around in fear won't stop Sephiroth. However, after he and Tifa leave, Barret suggests that they give Cloud time. They can't force him to come along, he needs to make that choice on his own. Rejoining the party, they set off to the City of the Ancients to find Aerith. To find the city, we take the tiny Bronco north to Bone Village, a large archaeological dig site. After a quick minigame, we dig up a harp that allows us to enter the sleeping forest behind the village. Exiting the forest, we arrive at the City of the Ancients. I really dig the architecture here, with formations resembling coral, seashells, and other elements that suggest it might have been an underwater society, which if true, might be vague allusions to the city of Atlantis. The party sleeps in one of the abandoned living areas, but in the middle of the night, Cloud wakes up sensing that Aerith is nearby. So is Sephiroth, and another piece of enemy skill materia. Traveling deeper into the city, we descend into the inner sanctum where we find Aerith alone, praying and communing with the planet. Cloud approaches her and suddenly pulls out his sword. As he moves toward Aerith, he struggles against her controls, jerking in different directions, raising his sword, but stopping just in time before he strikes when the others snap him out of it. Though Cloud manages to stop himself from doing the worst to Aerith, Sephiroth decides to do it himself. As Aerith's lifeless body falls into Cloud's arms, Sephiroth begins his grand speech about how she and everyone else will become one with the planet, but Cloud isn't having it. He angrily cuts Sephiroth off, declaring that he doesn't care about any of his plans. Aerith is gone. She can't speak, laugh, or feel anything anymore. Consumed by grief, Cloud is mocked by Sephiroth, who claims Cloud is just pretending, and that someone like him is incapable of emotions. Before Sephiroth can elaborate, flies off, leaving the team to face Jenova once more. Final Fantasy was never a stranger to major characters dying before 7. You had guest characters like Minwu dying in Final Fantasy II, and Galuf's epic last stand against Exdeath in Final Fantasy V. But Aerith's death was different. It was abrupt and sudden. It happens a third of the way into the story at the end of Disc 1. It happens just as a spark of a relationship between her and Cloud starts to form. Aerith's death hits the player just as hard as it does the party. Is it any surprise that almost 3 decades after the game's release, it's the most well-known video game death, even with people who'd never played the game? I mentioned near the beginning that I was one of those people who knew she would die, but it still hurt. I didn't know when it would happen, and honestly I was expecting it towards the end of the game in some sort of heroic sacrifice. But nope, I was wrong, and it still managed to catch me off guard. Both Tetsuya Nomura and Yoshinori Kitate expressed how they disliked how deaths were portrayed in Hollywood movies and other media, pointing out how they had grown tired of the cliche of a hero having to sacrifice their life for their loved ones. People die every day, sometimes from disease, sometimes by accident. Death is unexpected. It's not meant to be dramatic. When you lose someone you care about, you're left with a sense of emptiness. So they set out to make Aerith's death as realistic as possible, to have it be sudden and unexpected. Quoting Kitase, he wanted to leave players thinking, if I had known this was coming, I would have done things differently. And they nailed it. The fight against Jenova Life barely registers after her death, as Aerith's theme overwrites the usual fight music and plays throughout. When it came to composing her theme, Nobuo Uematsu didn't set out to create it with her death in mind and to make you cry. He wanted to write a sad but beautiful theme to capture how Aerith was pure and innocent, but that she lived a tragic life, to capture the sense of losing someone. After defeating Jenova Life, it'll finish what Sephiroth was saying before, calling Cloud nothing more than a mere puppet as it dies. Cloud will carry Aerith's body into the water, saying goodbye as she sinks beneath the lake. Disc 1 comes to an end as Cloud reaffirms who he is, an ex-soldier from Nibelheim who's determined to settle the score with Sephiroth. But he admits there's a part of him that scares him, a part that isn't really him. Cloud doesn't know what Aerith's plan was to stop Meteor, but he wants to do his best to pick up where she left off. He asks the others to follow him on his journey, and to stop him from doing something terrible. Finding the resolve to go after Sephiroth again, Disc 1 comes to an end. Starting Disc 2, our next move is to follow Sephiroth north, to the northern crater. Before that, it's Sidequest time. We head to Yuffie's homeland, Wutai. I originally did this before Bone Village in Disc 1, but diving into Wutai right after Cloud's breakdown felt off and would have disrupted the flow of the story. Wutai is only accessible by landing on a beach on the southern part of the western continent. As the party travels north, Yuffie warns them that it's a tough road ahead, then runs off and steals the group's materia after a random Shinra ambush. Oh, so this is why people hated Yuffie in the original game. We're locked into the side quest until we retrieve our materia, but the area is manageable without spells, especially if you grab those weapons from the Temple of the Ancients I mentioned before. They have no materia slots, but they do have high attack stats to make up for it. Wutai, once a proud nation, is now a mere tourist trap after losing the war to Shinra. The villagers are broken, and Yuffie's father Godo has a rocky relationship with her, due to his perceived rolling over to Shinra after the war. Chasing Yuffie around town, she reveals her obsession with materia is to amass as much as she can in order to make Wutai great again, and powerful enough to stand up to Shinra. She then bamboozles the party and traps them in her basement. While searching for her again, the party encounters the Turks at Turtle's Paradise, who are uninterested in fighting since they're on vacation. Which, fine, fair enough. Remember when I randomly mentioned checking out some posters earlier in the video? Well, they're part of a minor side quest here at the bar. Inspecting the sign outside, you'll learn that the Turtles Paradise Bar is offering prizes to whoever finds their promotional posters. There's 6 in total. The first is in a random kid's room in Sector 5, the second is in the Shinra Building lobby, the third is in the Ghost Hotel at the Gold Saucer, the fourth and fifth are in Cosmo Canyon, and the last one is in Yuffie's basement. Once you got all 6, speak to the bartender and you'll be rewarded with stat boosting items and a mega elixir. Not the most glamorous rewards, but I dig how early you can start this side mission, and how nothing in the game tells you where to find the posters. I had a whole thing written here originally discussing old school side quest design, but I'll keep it short, and I just missed the days when secrets felt like secrets, and there wasn't a quest marker pointing you in every single direction on what to do next or where to find something. Continuing the hunt for Yuffie, we end up bumping into Don Corneo, who I was not expecting to make a reappearance after the wall market. He's come to Wutai hunting for new brides, and he's set his sights on Yuffie and Elena. Joining forces with the Turks to rescue the girls, we'll track down Corneo, defeat his pet monster Rapaz, and watch him fall to his presumed death. Yuffie apologizes for real, returns the stolen materia, and rejoins the party. Before leaving, Yuffie can take on the Wutai Pagoda, where she fights 5 opponents solo back-to-back, ending with her father Godo. After winning, the two of them will reconcile, and we earn the Leviathan Summon Materia, and the all-creation item unlocking Yuffie's final limit break of the same name. With that settled, let's continue the plot. Leaving the Forgotten Capital, we cross the snow-covered landscape to arrive at the Icicle Inn, your classic cozy winter village, and my favorite RPG town staple. Initially I thought this would just be a quick stop before confronting Sephiroth, but I'd forgotten how many important reveals happen here. In the former home of Professor Gast, we discover videos on his computer detailing his research. The first shows an interview with Aerith's mother, Ifalna, who explains the history of the Cetra and Jenova. Jenova, the calamity Sephiroth mentioned, fell from the sky 2,000 years ago, causing a massive crater and nearly destroying the planet. A mix of Lavos from Chrono Trigger and the alien from The Thing, Jenova preyed on the Cetra by taking the form of their loved ones and infecting them with its cells. Like a virus, it corrupted and transformed the Cetra, and anything else it touched, into monsters. Ifalna also mentions Weapon, guardians created by the planet to fight Jenova, but were never deployed because the Cetra managed to subdue Jenova first. The last 2 videos reveal that Gast and Ifalna fell in love, and Gast is Aerith's father. We also witness Hojo capturing Ifalna and the infant Aerith, killing Gast in the process. I was genuinely stunned to learn all of this during this playthrough. Since no real attention is given to Aerith's father until this point, and Professor Gast is only mentioned in passing, I can't be sure if I ever knew this or if I just forgot. But it feels like this should be treated as far more significant than just something you stumble upon on his computer. There's so much potential from a story perspective. Like, does Aerith know who her father is? How would Sephiroth have reacted if he knew Aerith was Gast's daughter? If he still believed he was a Cetra, it could have created a different dynamic with her. Maybe he could have treated her like a sibling due to their perceived shared lineage, tried to persuade her to join his crusade, use it as yet another way to taunt Cloud, and that sooner or later she'll take his side. And when that inevitably didn't work, Sephiroth anguished when he realized she couldn't be swayed, forcing him to kill his only kin. I'm not saying this is a better narrative, or what I think they should have gone with, but it's just something I thought about as I took notes while playing. I like what we got with Sephiroth. It just feels there's a lot of layers about his character that could have been explored more. After a brief encounter with Elena, the group is thrown into a snowboarding minigame, which is pretty dull. There's no music, just the sound of the wind, and it goes on for close to 5 minutes. The controls aren't great either, and it's just not all that engaging. Snowboard kids, this minigame is not. After wiping out at the end of the trail, the group wake up in the Great Glacier. This place is a confusing interconnected area, where it's not entirely obvious what way you should go, or where you even are, even if you grab the map of the glacier from a house at the Icicle Inn. Also, you're only able to take 544 steps before Cloud passes out from hypothermia, and wakes up in a cabin north of the glacier, which, while it'll help you get to the next area faster, means you'll need to travel through the Great Glacier several times in order to pick up the optional items hidden throughout, including the Alexander Summon Materia. When you end up in the cabin, the old man living there will warn you of the dangers of the upcoming cliff. While scaling that cliff, you'll need to regulate Cloud's body temperature and prevent it from dropping below 26 degrees, or else wake up at the cabin again. But it's fairly simple to manage, as you just need to mash the square button to get his temperature back up while on a ledge. After scaling the cliff and traveling through a few crystal caves, the party will get into a boss fight with the 2-headed dragon Schizo, and upon defeating it and reaching the top of the cliff, you're treated to an FMV of a huge whirlwind surrounding the northern crater. Sensing Sephiroth inside, the group descends into the crater, encountering several men in black robes along the way. Many of these poor bastards are too weak to continue the journey and die as they press on. Rufus Shinra is also on his way, having finally tracked down Sephiroth's location, falsely believing the northern crater to be the promised land. Hojo is here as well, eager to witness the reunion that Sephiroth mentioned earlier. It's not long before the group bumps into this silver-haired jerk, while he's in the middle of killing some of the black-robed guys. When they confront him, he disappears in a puff of smoke, declaring that this body has outlived its usefulness. As the group looks around for him, Sephiroth appears above and completely bodies them. Aw, look how happy he is, celebrating his success. Let's wipe that smug look off his face. And it's another Jenova fight. Huh, I thought we were finally going to fight him this time. After defeating Jenova Death, it drops the Black Materia. Since Cloud fumbled the ball last time by handing it over to Sephiroth, Barrett will hold on to it for him. This is when the party learns that the Sephiroths we've been encountering were all life model decoys, the various men in black being possessed and controlled by him, with Jenova's cells changing their appearance to match his. Meanwhile, his real body has been here the entire time. As we proceed further into the maze, we're sent into an illusion of Nibelheim on the day Sephiroth arrived. However, something is different. This other soldier with him isn't Cloud. Reliving the events of Nibelheim with this unknown soldier taking Cloud's place, Cloud dismisses it as a trick. He thinks it's just Sephiroth trying to mess with them even more. Tifa struggles to watch, the memories of that day too painful for her to relive. Or so it seems. Cloud remains calm. He remembers every moment of that horrible day. He was there. He knows he was there. Wasn't he? Sephiroth claims Cloud is just a puppet, an experiment created by Hojo using Jenova's cells, Tifa's memories, and Mako. He was meant to be a Sephiroth clone like the men in black robes, but was deemed a failure, so he was never branded with a number. Quick aside, they're not meant to be literal clones of Sephiroth, but test subjects injected with Jenova cells to test Hojo's reunion theory, and create beings similar to Sephiroth. Instead, they ended up becoming puppets that Sephiroth could control through Jenova's cells. Cloud tries to maintain a strong front, but as Tifa reassures him that he's real, and urges him not to listen, his resolve starts to waver. Sephiroth continues to chip away at his psyche, insisting that Cloud is just a memory of the boy Tifa remembers from her childhood. To push Cloud further, Sephiroth offers proof that Cloud wasn't at Nibelheim the day it was destroyed, showing him a photo taken before they ascended Mount Nibel. In the photo, Tifa's there, Sephiroth is there, but Cloud isn't, just the same black-haired soldier. Cloud tries to dismiss it as another illusion. He's certain he was there. Cloud remembers visiting his mom, the townspeople, going into Tifa's house, playing the piano, searching her room. He was excited. It was his first mission after becoming a soldier first class. But when did he reach that rank? When did he join soldier? The gaps in his memory begin to erode his resolve further, but Cloud manages to hang on. He keeps it together and insists the party move on. The scene then shifts to Rufus, Scarlet, and Hojo arriving at the northern crater, where they discover a massive deposit of Mako. Then suddenly the ground begins to shake. Something big is in there with them. Despite previously believing them to be a myth, Hojo reveals that the shaking is being caused by a weapon. The scene then shifts again to the characters not in your active party, where a wave of energy envelops whoever you chose to give the Black Materia. In my case, it was Barrett, who suddenly finds himself alone until Tifa appears and tells him that Cloud's in trouble. He rushes off to help, but Tifa then turns to the camera, laughs, and transforms into Sephiroth. Sephiroth reminds him not to forget the Black Materia before disappearing, and we see that the rest of the group was temporarily knocked out. The focus then returns to Rufus's group, with Cloud, Tifa, and Vincent suddenly appearing alongside them. Cloud tells everyone not to worry. He'll take it from here. Barrett soon shows up and hands him the Black Materia. Cloud turns to everyone and apologizes, ignoring Tifa's pleas to stop. He continues saying this is all for the reunion, which sends Hojo into an ecstatic celebration. Hojo is thrilled that his experiments worked and that this theory about Jenova's severed body and cells being drawn together to become whole again is correct. However, he's disappointed to learn that Cloud was one of the clones he had deemed a failure, leaving poor Cloud desperately begging to be given a number, a sense of identity. As Cloud spirals out of control, separating himself from the others, Hojo explains the flaw in his theory. He was initially puzzled about why Jenova's main body left the Shinra Building, until he realized that Sephiroth had exerted his will over all of his clones. Cloud wasn't chasing Sephiroth, he was being summoned to him. After Sephiroth's death in Nibelheim, his spirit refused to dissolve into the lifestream, and his body ended up here, encased in a cocoon of Mako. Cloud then hands over the Black Materia, awakening Sephiroth as the cavern around them collapses. A surge of energy shoots out of the ground as everyone escapes in Rufus's airship, the Highwind. With Sephiroth successfully summoning Meteor, the planet senses a massive threat and awakens its guardians, the 5 creatures known as Weapons. However, due to the strong barrier Sephiroth has surrounded himself with, they can't detect him, and instead scatter around the globe to attack the second greatest threat to the planet, humanity. As the Highwind is enveloped by energy, Tifa will fall unconscious, and we briefly see Cloud disappear into the darkness as Tifa calls out to him. We're then shown a flashback of Tifa finding a sick and amnesiac Cloud at the Sector 7 station, several months before the game's events began. When she called out to him, he slowly pulled himself together and recognized her. Tifa asked how long it had been since they last saw each other, and after struggling to remember, Cloud responded that it had been 5 years, the Nibelheim Incident. But that wasn't right. The last time Tifa remembered seeing him was 7 years ago, when he left to join Soldier. She knew something was off with him. He knew things he couldn't possibly know because he wasn't there. Unsure of what happened to him, Tifa decided to wait and give him time before questioning him further. But when Cloud announced his plans to leave Midgar and go somewhere far away, she panicked. Tifa didn't want him to leave, so she avoided bringing up his memories and instead told him about the Avalanche job. This is what she'd been trying to work up the courage to talk to him about all along. This is why she remained mostly silent when he discussed the events of 5 years ago during their stop at Com. When Tifa asked him if he really went to her home and searched through her things, it wasn't just an optional gag for a laugh. She was trying to confirm the truth. In fact, Tifa might have been trying to talk to Cloud about his memories, not just her feelings, during the gondola date if her affection was the highest. This is also why she kept trying to reassure Cloud during the Nibelheim vision. Sephiroth had confirmed that her memories of what happened were the real ones. I see Tifa catch a lot of flack about not telling Cloud the truth and avoiding the issue, but can you really blame her? Remember, Tifa went through a traumatic experience. She watched all the people in her village get killed, saw her father murdered, and almost died herself. That, and there's something I think a lot of people overlook. Tifa doesn't know how she survived. Even though Cloud wasn't there, he knew everything that happened. He also knew things she didn't, like how Sephiroth learned of Jenova, discovered what he was, and lost his mind. It's not just about worrying how Cloud would react when confronted, and more about her fear of what it would mean if her memories were wrong. How could Tifa be sure that Cloud's recollection of events wasn't what really happened? And especially when he seems so confident and sure of himself about what happened. There's more to go into about this reveal, and Tifa's involvement in the whole thing, but we'll have to wait till we find a certain piece of evidence. When Tifa regains consciousness, she finds herself in Junon, where Barrett is by her side. He tells her that she's been out for a week. Rufus Shinra is currently trying to fight one of the rampaging weapons. Cloud is missing, and most importantly, Meteor is on its way. Things take a darker turn when Rufus arrives. He decides to blame the party for the catastrophe involving Meteor and plans to have them publicly executed to appease the masses. Well, thanks a lot, you dick. Barrett and Tifa are escorted to a press room filled with reporters, where Tifa is placed in a gas chamber to be executed first. Suddenly, alarms blare, signaling that one of the weapons is approaching Junon. In the ensuing chaos, as Shinra fights the monster, Kate Sith appears and frees Barrett. However, they're unable to release Tifa from the chamber, so they begin searching for the control room to unlock it. Although they don't find the control room, they encounter Yuppie along the way and eventually reach the Highwind. Tifa still has a chance though, as a guard accidentally drops the key to her bindings. After a quick minigame, she frees herself but can't open the door to escape. She looks out when a stray attack from the Sapphire weapon creates a convenient escape route for her. The giant monster then has its head blown off by Junon's massive artillery gun. Props to Rufus for actually managing to kill a weapon, actually. He's still a dick though. As Tifa makes her escape, Scarlet gives chase, leading to a catfight minigame where they slap each other around. Baird and the rest of the party pick Tifa up on the Highwind before escaping the area. Aboard the airship, Tifa is unsure what to do next, doubting Cloud but also worrying about his safety. Sid gives her a pep talk, reassuring her that she wasn't the only one who noticed Cloud was a bundle of contradictions, but he still believes Cloud is a good person at heart. Red 13, suspecting that Cloud may have been swallowed up by the livestream, explains that it sometimes surfaces due to large cracks in the planet, giving us a hint at where we should begin searching for Cloud. Now that we have access to the Highwind, we can freely explore most of the map and revisit previous areas to collect new items and materia. However, the airship can only land on green or plains areas of the map, and only in patches large enough to accommodate it, so some locations remain inaccessible for now. Also, reflecting the dire situation they're all in, with Meteor on its way, the world map theme has been replaced with an ominous and depressing theme. Traveling to the southeastern portion of the map, we arrive at the hot springs town of Midgar. The first order of business is to feed the white chocobo chick in the item shop some mimic greens, which you can buy back at the chocobo farm. In return, you receive the contained Materia, which allows you to cast high-level elemental spells including Flare. Next, we inspect the locked door in the weapons shop, and afterwards, pick up the beat-up key on the nearby bridge and attempt to use it on the locked door. Tifa breaks the key and panics, but the store owner, noticing the commotion, reveals that the door isn't real. It's just painted on the wall for aesthetics, which is kinda stupid. Like, how did she not notice that at all? He apologizes for the confusion and gives her the cursed ring. The ring significantly boosts your stats when equipped, but it comes with a drawback. The character starts all battles with death sentence in effect, which kills him in 60 seconds. However, if you link the added effect materia to the Destruct or Odin materia on your armor, it cancels out the death sentence effect. This setup can turn Tifa into a powerhouse when used with her Power Soul or Master Fist weapons, as these increase her damage output while she's under the effects of death sentence. Heading north of town, while petting a friendly Poochie, Tifa will overhear some people discussing a man who washed ashore several days ago. Rushing to the doctor's office, we're reunited with Cloud, but his condition is dire. He suffered severe Mako poisoning while submerged in the lifestream, leaving him in a vegetative state. Cloud is unaware of his surroundings, can't recognize his friends, and is unable to speak. Tifa desperately tries to reach out to him, begging him to tell her what she should do. Outside, the doctor speaks with the rest of the party, explaining that it's a miracle Cloud is even alive after being exposed to so much Mako. Despite Cloud's current state, the doctor encourages the others not to give up hope, as there's still a chance he may recover someday. Although Tifa is unsure if Cloud is truly the boy she remembers, she decides to leave the party and care for him. Meanwhile, back on the Highwind, Katesith reveals that Rufus and the other Shinra directors are up to something. They've devised a plan to try and stop Meteor by firing a rocket at it containing huge materia. Due to its potency, they believe that with enough materia, they can reduce the giant rock to dust. Huge materia is created inside Mako reactors, and Shinra already has one of them from Nibelheim. They need 3 more for their plan, which are located at the Corel, Fort Condor, and underwater reactors. Despite Shinra's efforts to do something about Meteor, and nothing indicating their plan couldn't work, the game frames it as something that needs to be stopped. It feels odd that we're getting involved without any reason, beyond not trusting them, but whatever. Also, Barrett doesn't feel capable of leading the others, so Sid steps up as our temporary party leader. At the Corel reactors, Shinra takes off with the huge materia on a train. The party will follow on another train, boards Shinra's train, hijacks it, and frantically stops it before it crashes into North Corel. With the first huge materia obtained, townspeople are grateful to Barrett and the others for stopping the train, even though it was their fault it was going to crash in the first place. As thanks, a kid gives them the Ultima materia, and a woman in town gives them the Catastrophe item, which unlocks Barrett's level 4 limit break of the same name. Heading to Fort Condor next, we need to play another round of the minigame to stop Shinra, but it's honestly easier and faster to just intentionally lose the minigame, and then stop the boss you fight afterwards. The egg the large condor was sitting on will finally hatch, and the newborn chick will leave behind the Phoenix materia. And talking to the elder inside, he'll give us the second huge materia as thanks for protecting the bird. Before heading to the underwater reactor, Sid suggests that we check up on Tifa and Cloud. Unfortunately, our little buddy hasn't made any progress. Suddenly, the ground begins to rumble, and Cloud briefly becomes lucid, warning that something is coming their way. Heading outside, the party is attacked by another of the planet's guardians, the ultimate weapon. At this stage of the game, it's immensely powerful, boasting a whopping 100,000 HP. Thankfully, you're not expected to defeat it, just survive long enough for it to fly away. However, the tremors don't stop and Midgar begins to crumble, collapsing into a large pit of Mako. Tifa tries her best to get Cloud to safety, but the pair are swallowed up by the lifestream. When Tifa regains consciousness, she finds herself in a surreal manifestation of Cloud's broken psyche, surrounded by several copies of him. Interacting with the first Cloud, we're taken back to his memories of the Nibelheim Incident. Realizing the mistake she made in hiding the truth, Tifa finally reveals that Cloud wasn't in Nibelheim 5 years ago. It was really Sephiroth and the black-haired soldier. The next memory Tifa interacts with is of the two of them as kids, sitting at the well and making their promise. This is a real memory. Cloud didn't fabricate it, which is why she's certain he isn't a fake and is in fact the real deal. To help him by testing his memory and intentions, she asks Cloud why he wanted to join Soldier in the first place. He admits that he was desperate to be noticed by others, especially by Tifa. A younger version of Cloud then manifests and shows her a significant memory of his, where Tifa is in her room as a child, surrounded by other kids, with Cloud outside looking through the window. The pair didn't hang out much as kids since she was part of her own group. Cloud was desperate to belong, but was too afraid to approach the others. He initially coped by convincing himself they were dumb and not worth his time, but gradually, Cloud began to wonder if the problem was with him, if something was wrong with him, which is why he didn't fit in. He wished to be different, to be special, and thought that maybe if he joined Soldier, Tifa and the others would acknowledge him. This vision then reveals this wasn't just any random day. It was the day Tifa's mom died. Desperate to see her mother again, Tifa convinced the other kids to climb up Mount Nibel, hoping to see her spirit at the summit. Cloud trailed behind them and rushed to help Tifa when she missed a step, but both ended up falling off a cliff. Tifa fell into a coma for 7 days, and her father blamed Cloud for the entire incident. Angry at himself for failing to save her, and believing he was too weak, Cloud began lashing out and picking fights with the other kids in town. It was also around this time that he first heard about Sephiroth. As the pieces start to fall into place, Tifa becomes certain that Cloud is indeed the same person she remembers. They just need one more thing to complete the puzzle. The final vision takes us to the events at the Mount Nibel Mako reactor. After Tifa is cut down, the black-haired soldier appears to confront Sephiroth, and Cloud remembers who he is. Zack. The same Zack that Aerith mentioned was her first love. Finally, we get the big reveal, the key piece of information that explains all the inconsistencies in both their memories. Cloud really was at Nibelheim, but he was nameless Shinra Grunt number 2. He never made it into Soldier, and feeling like a failure, he kept his helmet on, unable to reveal himself to Tifa. After Zack was injured fighting Sephiroth, Cloud would take his Buster Sword. Overcome with anger with what happened to his town, his mother, and Tifa, he managed to surprise Sephiroth and stab him. But it wasn't enough to finish him off. As Sephiroth tried to leave with Jenova's head, Zack urged Cloud to finish the job. Despite being impaled for his efforts, Cloud turned the situation around and flung Sephiroth into the depths of the reactor, down into the life stream, seemingly killing him. With the truth finally revealed, the fractured pieces of Cloud's mind come back together. The little blonde doofus was a real boy after all. I mentioned at the beginning that I had a completely wrong idea about who Cloud was, as spin-offs and other media played his quiet, tough guy act completely straight. But that wasn't the real him. It was a mask he'd fabricated. And despite what some may think, Cloud was never meant to perfectly capture Zack's mannerisms and personality either. Cloud created a persona based on his idolized version of Zack, the strong, dependable, and kind soldier he considered his friend. Someone who would be acknowledged by others. This is outright confirmed by Aerith during the gondola date, where she noticed how much he resembled Zack, but recognized that they weren't the same, and that Cloud was his own person. Unlike Aerith's death, I didn't know about this revelation regarding Cloud the first time I played, so I was genuinely surprised to discover it. And man, have I really come to appreciate his character journey over the years. Everyone deals with mental health issues to some extent. I know I sure have. Younger me was right there in Cloud's shoes as a kid. Socially awkward and introverted, with a desire to fit in and belong, but too afraid to make the first move out of fear of rejection. I worried I was the problem because they didn't include me, and I wished I could become the tribal chief so people would acknowledge me.
Acknowledge me!
It's a steep mountain to climb in order to overcome your insecurities, especially by yourself. But eventually, you find the people who get you. People you can relate to and be yourself around. Your ride or dies, ready to take on the world and stop a giant meteor from hitting the planet. Cloud and Tifa leave the life stream and wake up surrounded by the others. On the high wind, Cloud catches everyone up on what happened, opening up about his self-doubt and weaknesses. Now that he understands and accepts his true self, Cloud rededicates himself to saving the planet. After all, there ain't no getting off this train. Also, I love that this random NPC in the room overheard everything and was moved by Cloud's story. So touching. Reflecting Cloud's and the party's determination to save the world, the depressing music is overwritten by a more triumphant and upbeat track. But only when you're riding in the high wind. Once you touch down on land, it's back to depressing imminent doom. Now that Cloud's back, there's a couple things we could do before going after the remaining huge materia. First, we'll head to Nibelheim and interact with the piano in Tifa's room. If you play the world map theme on it, which I have no clue how the game expects you to know what button corresponds to what note, you'll find a note left for Tifa in the sheet music. It's from her martial arts master Zazan. Like her, he was baffled to discover Nibelheim rebuilt. However, he still vividly remembers what happened, how he desperately tried to save people, the anger that surged through him as he went to the reactor to kill Sephiroth. He couldn't find Sephiroth. Zazan only found Tifa, Zack, and Cloud. He carried Tifa out of there, but that's when Shinra troops arrived, Hojo leading the charge and ordering them to gather up the survivors for an experiment. Unable to save Zack and Cloud, he got Tifa out of there and sought treatment for her injuries in Midgar. Once she was safe, he returned to traveling the world, stopping by Nibelheim after it had been rebuilt. Zazan asked Tifa how she is, apologizes for what happened, and that he promises he won't go after Shinra, explaining he feels like he's getting old, and he's unable to jump anymore when fighting. He left this letter and a gift for Tifa, knowing his prized student will continue fighting. Zazan's gift will unlock her level 4 limit break final heaven. His letter answers the question about what happened to Tifa after being attacked by Sephiroth, and how Hojo captured Cloud, and that he also captured Zack. That just leaves one question left up in the air. Where's Zack? Well, we can only find the answers we seek by returning to the basement of the Shinra mansion in Disc 3. When Cloud steps inside, we're shown a vision of him and Zack floating in containment tanks. Zack will attack the guy delivering their food, and he'll carry Cloud out of the mansion and out of town. Hitching a ride to Midgar, he changes Cloud into a soldier uniform. Due to the experiments and Mako poisoning, Cloud is in rough shape and unable to speak. Still, Zack tries his best to help him, asking his buddy what his plans are when they reach Midgar. Zack plans to crash at his girlfriend's place, but remembers she lives with her mom, so it might be a bad idea. He tells Cloud they should open up a business together, and after asking the old guy driving them for advice, Zack decides on becoming a mercenary to get by. He won't leave his buddy behind though, because Cloud's gonna be a mercenary alongside him. The scene shifts to the two of them on the outskirts of Midgar. Some Shinra troops have caught up to the pair. Zack tries to fight them off, but is killed trying to protect Cloud. Declaring Cloud a lost cause due to the state he's in, the Shinra troops leave him for dead. The flashback comes to an end as Cloud mourns Zack's death in the rain. And with that, the lingering questions about Cloud's past have been answered. Oh, Zack, they did you so dirty. To fight Sephiroth and live only to be taken out by some random Shinra grunts? Really glad Crisis Core expanded his character, and had him go down by fighting an entire army instead. And good God, did they make the experience of his death overwhelming. Holy shit. Really hope I get to talk about Crisis Core one of these days. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want me to do that. Alrighty, let's get that next huge materia. To reach the underwater reactor, we head back to Junon, which is now missing its iconic giant cannon. Wonder what that's about. To reach the reactor, we take an elevator down to the bottom of the ocean, arriving at Shinra's submarine port. Reno is down here, but he isn't interested in fighting, and summons a mech called the Carry Armor. It's nothing special, but you can steal the God Hand from it for Tifa. Although it doesn't have many materia slots, it has a high attack stat and hit percentage, meaning it never misses, making it perfect to pair with the Death Blow materia. The combination guarantees that Tifa will always land a critical hit when using the command. Also, while you're down here, be sure to pick up the Leviathan scales, as you need it to get past the Wall of Fire and Wutai to get the Steel as well materia. Shinra takes off with the huge materia in their submarine, so the group gives chase by hijacking another submarine docked here. It's time for another minigame. You have 10 minutes to chase down the other sub and sink it before it can escape with the huge materia. And it sure is something. I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure how to judge the quality of the submarine combat. It doesn't feel cobbled together. The UI shows your depth, sonar for radar, and the direction your sub is moving in. The controls are a bit janky, but not terrible. You can move the sub backwards, and your torpedoes home in on your target once locked on. The submarine feels sluggish, but that's to be expected in underwater combat. The depth of field is tiny, so obstacles and mines to avoid constantly pop in, but you don't move fast enough for them to be impossible to dodge. It feels like what a submarine simulation game would probably feel like on the PS1. Just really dull looking. It's just not for me, really. At the very least, you can end this chase pretty quickly as long as you keep the other submarine in your line of sight. After the battle, we retrieve the huge materia from the wreckage of the red submarine, and we get to keep the Shinra sub to sail the seas and explore the ocean depths. You know, despite how the deep ocean is often portrayed as mysterious or outright terrifying in games and other media, In Final Fantasy VII, it's probably one of the most calming and peaceful betrayals I've ever seen in a game. The only other games I can think of that do the same are Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, when you dive underwater in certain routes. I feel at peace down here, like nothing can hurt me. Wait, what is that? With 3 of the 4 huge materia in their possession, the party heads to Rocket Town to prevent Shinra from launching the last one at Meteor. After battling through Shinra troops and Rude, they commandeer the rocket. The engineers are eager to save the world by blowing up Meteor, but the autopilot isn't functional, so Sid volunteers to fly the rocket into space. Cloud questions this plan, arguing that the huge materia's power could be invaluable in their fight against Sephiroth. Well, at least the game gives us a reason why we might want the huge materia. Sid, while seeing Cloud's point, argues that science, humanity's creation, could be what saves the planet. His reasoning is partially selfish, as this is his chance to realize his dream of going into space, but he also believes in the positive impact of technology, despite Shinra's misuse of it. As the group think about their next move, Palmer suddenly comes on the loudspeaker and announces he's activated the rocket's auto-launch. Also, I guess he survived getting hit by that random truck, and he wasn't isekai'd into a cliched fantasy world where he's super OP and has a harem. Unable to stop the launch, the party is along for the ride. While Sid marvels at finally achieving space travel, they realize they're doomed to crash into Meteor. Fortunately, the rocket has an escape pod they can use to return to Earth. You can also choose to take the huge materia with you, as it won't stop Meteor anyway. To disable the mechanism holding the huge materia, the party must enter a passcode, and after securing it and heading to the escape pod, an oxygen tank explodes, trapping Sid under wreckage. As others try to free him, Sid reflects that Shira was right about the faulty tank, and maybe he shouldn't have treated her so harshly. Fortunately, Shira is still on the rocket, and helps free him. He yells at her again, but quickly apologizes, though we never see them reconcile over the years of verbal abuse he threw at her. Once he's free, the group escapes in the pod as the rocket hits Meteor, barely making a dent. All seems lost. Back on the Highwind, Cloud notes that Shinra's plan was a failure, and Barrett mentions that part of him wished it would have worked. Which, honestly, maybe it could have if they hadn't sabotaged it? The party didn't have any ideas of their own on how to stop Meteor, so it makes them look like idiots for messing with Shinra's plan just because. It would have made way more sense if the huge materia had been necessary to stop Sephiroth in some way, or deactivate his barrier, rather than just being some wishful thinking from Cloud. Oh well. Sid gives a great speech about how small our world is after seeing it from space, and how they need to do all they can to protect it, only to blow it when he admits he has no idea how to actually do that. The party then hears the cries of the planet, and Red 13 suggests they go see Bugenhagen for advice. When they speak to the old man, he tells them to focus and find the answers they seek within themselves. What do they know? And what don't they know? While it sounds like spiritual bullshit, it gets the group thinking about Aerith. She never explained what her plan was to defeat Sephiroth before he murdered her, but she was confident it would work. So she traveled to the Forgotten Capital as part of that plan. A light bulb goes off in their heads and they realize they should probably just go back there and search for clues to figure it out. I'd call them idiots for not piecing this together much earlier, but they were dealing with grief, and Cloud lost his mind not long after. Bugenhagen decides to tag along to assist, and before leaving the observatory, we can entrust a huge materia to him. And if you nabbed all 4 of them, your reward is the Bahamut Zero summon, which, while good, isn't the best summon materia in the game. Returning to the Forgotten Capital, Bugenhagen communes with an orb of knowledge left by the ancients. He learns that the only way to prevent the upcoming catastrophe is to use the ultimate white magic, Holy. Through the power of the white materia, if a soul-seeking Holy can reach the planet, the materia will glow pale green, allowing them to call upon this spell to dispel all threats to the planet. Sephiroth, Meteor, the weapons, and possibly even humanity itself. Cloud, dejected, realizes they're all doomed. Aerith had the white materia with her when she died, and it fell into the depths of the lake around the altar where she was killed. There's no one left to cast Holy. Bugenhagen still has faith and spots something scribbled under the ancient writing of the orb. Music box and key. So we need to find the ancient key to learn more, which I'm not sure what points you in its direction, as I already grabbed it before this, but the key is in a cavern underwater. Handing it to Bugenhagen, he'll place it in an altar that spins the key against a bunch of crystals, serving as the music box that activates a waterfall. Said waterfall envelops the orb of knowledge and it projects an image of Aerith at the time of her death. The white materia was glowing as it fell from the altar. She managed to pray for Holy before Sephiroth killed her. Cloud apologizes to her for not realizing sooner, thanking Aerith for what she did, and promising to pick up where she left off. However, despite her successfully calling Holy, it still hasn't activated. Bugenhagen and the party believe it's most likely Sephiroth's doing. His powerful will and connection to the planet preventing Holy from activating. Also, this kinda clears up a misconception I've always had about Aerith's death. But her death wasn't necessary to cast Holy because she did it before she died, right? I'll leave that thought alone for now as the ending kinda puts a question mark on it, but we'll talk about it later. The party then gets a call from Cait Sith. The reason the Mako cannon, now renamed the Sister Ray, wasn't at Junon is because Rufus moved it so he could use it to kill Sephiroth. Since we took all the huge materia, there's only one other thing that can power it: Midgar itself. At the same exact time, the diamond weapon rises from the water and is making a beeline for Midgar. After a brief discussion, the party decides to intervene and fly off to confront Diamond Weapon. You have to patiently wait until it reaches the shore to get in a fight, otherwise if you crash the airship into it, Sid will get mad. After kicking its ass, Rufus fires the Sister Ray to finish it off, and the beam is strong enough to pass through it and go all the way north, and take out Sephiroth's barrier too. The diamond weapon has the last laugh though, firing a volley of attacks before it dies, aimed directly at Rufus, apparently killing him. Like saying, Rufus doesn't appear again after this, and while it's clear he was meant to die here, Advent Children reveals that he somehow survived. I like Advent Children, and I do like what they do with Rufus in that movie, but I don't know, man, I feel like they kept the Turks and him around purely out of fan service and not like they really needed him in the movie. Despite the barrier being down, the situation remains dire as Hojo has hijacked the Sister Ray. He's increased its output and plans to fire an even more powerful blast of Mako for Sephiroth to absorb. Cait Sith has no way of stopping him, as turning off the valves to the reactors would cause a massive explosion that would take all of Midgar with it. He tells the party to come to Midgar to stop Hojo personally. And this is when we discover that Cait Sith has been Reeve the entire time. Caught by Heidegger and Scarlet while speaking to the party, Reeve is imprisoned and they assume control of Shinra. So I was a little confused by this, but how is he still controlling Cait Sith while he's locked up? The game doesn't explain how Reeve controls Cait Sith, but according to the Final Fantasy VII Ultimania Omega book, Reeve is something called an Inspire, which allows him to breathe life into and control inorganic objects. It's great that there's an explanation. I would have loved to see that in-game. Would a quick cutscene of his chibi model casting a spell to make this obvious have been too much to ask for? Sorry, I'm getting off topic again. The party will parachute into Midgar and sneak into the underground, revisiting the tunnels from way back during the Mako Reactor 5 mission. And while down there, they face Elena, Reno, and Rude in a boss fight. Before heading to Hojo's location, you're given the option to return to the Shinra Building one last time, and to pick up some permanently missable items. The most important ones are the Turtle Paradise poster in the lobby, if you didn't interact with it the first time, and Cait Sith's ultimate weapon, HP Shout, which is in a locker on the 64th floor. Once that business is done, on your way to Hojo, you'll be confronted by Heidegger and Scarlet piloting their new anti-weapon mech, the Proud Claude. After destroying their toy and killing them along with it, you'll reach a save point and you'll want to switch Barrett into your party. You won't be able to pick up his ultimate weapon missing score up ahead unless he's with you. Finally reaching Hojo, he admits he's starting to doubt his scientific ability. Despite declaring Cloud a failure, he was his only successful Sephiroth clone. And Hojo even thinks Cloud would make a good scientist. I don't know why, but okay. When the party asks why he's helping Sephiroth, Hojo dismisses it as a stupid question. Why wouldn't he help Sephiroth? That's his son after all. Yep, that's right. This egotistical asshole fathered Sephiroth. While initially treating him as just another experiment, even if it was his best success, everything Sephiroth has achieved has caused Hojo to have a sinister change of heart, now proud of what his son has accomplished, and eager to help him. Though Hojo wonders how Sephiroth would feel knowing the truth that he's his father. Remember way back in COM, when Cloud first talked about the Nibelheim Incident, and I said, "Remember this for later"? With the way Sephiroth acts when bringing up his father, he knows it's Hojo, and thinks it's pretty laughable. Given how Sephiroth idolized Gast and dismissed Hojo, I take it he considers his old man a joke. This also raises a lot of questions about what Lucretius saw in Hojo. She wasn't just his assistant volunteering for the Genova project, she was his wife. But I'll rant about that in Disc 3. Hojo reveals he's injected Genova cells into himself, and we're thrown into a 3-stage boss fight against him. The first phase has us fighting Hojo and a couple of his experiments. In phase 2, he mutates into a vaguely Genova-shaped abomination called Helectic Hojo. Finally, in phase 3, he transforms into Lifeform Hojo, which has a sleeker, vaguely angelic alien design. I'm probably reading too much into it. His final form is probably an attempt to resemble a perfect being or something, but it could also be a vague shout out to Lavos' true form, or even Frieza from DBZ. With Hojo dead now, and totally never coming back in any way, shape, or form, the party returns to the Highwind. With the final battle coming up, Cloud wants everyone to reflect on what they're really fighting for. Not the vague goal of saving the planet, but the people and things precious to them. He dismisses everyone to take some time to reflect, prepare, and see their loved ones one last time before they go after Sephiroth. Tifa stays behind, and the two have a conversation on the ground underneath the Highwind. They don't have a hometown or loved ones to go back to. All they have is each other. How the dialogue in this scene plays out depends on how high your affection with Tifa is at this point. If her affection is below 50 points, it's a pretty standard conversation. With Cloud unable to admit he heard Tifa's voice pulling him from the livestream, the two camp under the Highwind with Tifa resting on his shoulder, and they sleep a little longer after waking up at dawn. However, if her affection is above 50 points, Cloud opens up more to Tifa, admitting that she saved him, that he learned a lot from her, but he still struggles to find the right words to say. And then Tifa tells Cloud, words aren't the only thing that tells people what you're thinking, before the scene fades to black, and we see her resting on his shoulder again. When Cloud wakes Tifa, she wants a little more time to enjoy this moment, knowing this day will never come again. Cloud replies this could be the last moment they'll have together, before the scene shifts and they return to the Highwind. Which, yeah, heavily implies they did the deed right there under the stars and under the Highwind. Further supported by Tifa's embarrassed reaction when she finds out the rest of the party were already back on the Highwind. And not so subtly implied they saw the two down there. Yeah, that happens regardless of how high her affection stat is, but Tifa's reaction makes more sense if they actually slept together, as opposed to just sleeping together. Poor Tifa. It's just like that Italian Senate meeting all over again. I like to think Barrett and Sid were being real dads about it, cracking open a couple of beers, making some jokes, not actively watching them, but happy these dumb kids got together. Also, I guess that means you win, Cloudy shippers. But you know, that's only because Aerith is dead. This scene totally could have happened with her too. No, I'm not in denial, shut up. With the rest of the gang back together, Disc 2 comes to an end as they fly off to the Northern Cave to take down Sephiroth once and for all. Alright kiddos, we've almost crossed the finish line. Since all there's left to do in the story is to settle up with Sephiroth, let me use this section to breeze through the remaining side quests. First, the remaining ultimate weapons and level 4 limit breaks for your party. First up is Cloud. Hey, remember the ultimate weapon you briefly fought when our boy was a vegetable? Well, it's still out there. You'll find it hovering over a lake east of Junon. Just fly up to it in the Highwind and engage it in battle. Once you have done enough damage, it'll run away like a bitch and you'll need to follow it around the map, crashing in the Highwind a few times till it settles down and you can fight it again. Thankfully its HP doesn't regenerate, so you'll slowly whittle it down with each battle. You'll fight it for the final time in Cosmo Canyon, and when it dies it'll cast Shadow Flare, which you can learn with the enemy skill Materia. And it'll drop Cloud's ultimate weapon, the Ultima Weapon. The devs really swung for the fences with that name, huh? After it dies, the ultimate weapon explodes and creates a crater that lets you enter the Ancient Forest, a puzzle-based area where you can find some decent items, weapons, and the Typhoon Summon Materia. Next is Cloud's level 4 limit break Omni Slash. It's one of the prizes you can buy at the Gold Saucer, but it costs a whopping 32,000 BP. So you'll need to deck Cloud out in your best armor and materia, and grind out the battle square until you have enough to afford it. Effectively the best attack in the game, Omni Slash will hit 15 times, each attack a critical hit. So if Cloud's attack stat is high enough, he'll hit the damage cap and melt anything in his way. Next up is Tifa. We already grabbed the Final Heaven limit break at Nibelheim, but to get her ultimate weapon, we need the key to Midgar Sector 5. which can be dug up at the Bone Village. Use it to return to Midgar, then run back to the Wall Market, and when entering the item shop that had a defective turret that would shoot at you when you got close to a box in the back, Sid will take a look at it and fix it, letting you safely pick up the premium heart. Now on to Red 13. His level 4 limit break Cosmo memory was actually in the safe in the Shinra mansion, which I forgot to mention. While his ultimate weapon Limited Moon is given to him by Bugenhagen at Cosmo Canyon in Disc 3. We already picked up Yuffie's level 4 limit break back at the Wutai Pagoda, but her ultimate weapon, the Conformer, is in the Sunken Galnica optional dungeon. In between the Gold Saucer and Costa del Sol, you need to use the submarine to dive down below to reach a sunken plane. This is the Sunken Galnica. Inside are some very powerful monsters that are great for grinding or morphing into stat boosting items. You can also get into a boss battle with Reno and Rude, but only if you visit here before you return to Midgar in Disc 2. The most important things to find are the Conformer, the Hades Summon Materia, and Sid's level 4 limit break High Wind. Meanwhile, Sid's ultimate weapon, Venus Gospel, can be picked up by returning to Rocket Town and speaking to the old man in front of the inn after our brief adventure in space. Finally, I saved the best for last, Vincent. Using the submarine, we can navigate a few tunnels and surface in the lake that ultimate weapon was hovering over. And docking ashore, we can enter a secret cave. Inside, we find Vincent's lost love and Sephiroth's real mommy, Lucretia. The scene transitions to an extended, mostly silent flashback sequence showing Lucretia, Hojo, and Gast all setting up at the Shinra mansion to begin work on the Genova project. A younger Vincent is there too, assigned as their bodyguard. It shows that Vincent and Lucretia eventually grow close, but in a scene that implies he confesses his feelings to her, Lucretia rejects him. Instead, she runs into the arms of Hojo, which, woof. At first I thought this was because she was already married to Hojo and wanted to stay faithful, but it's implied they got married after she rejected Vincent, which, what? Why? What person in their right mind would choose this psycho over Vincent? Dirge of Cerberus makes better sense of the whole thing, but I'm only going to discuss what's shown here. Sometime later, Lucretia and Hojo use their unborn child for the Genova project, and she gives birth to Sephiroth. While the experiment proves successful, the lingering Genova cells in Lucretia's body has adverse effects, causing her to collapse one day. Vincent confronts Hojo over what happened, and Hojo just shoots Vincent, using him as a test subject. Hojo modifies Vincent's body so he can turn into a variety of different monsters, and it somehow slows down or stops his aging. And after that, Vincent seals himself away as penance for not stopping the Genova project or saving Lucretia. In the present day, Lucretia says she wants to disappear and die, but the Genova cells inside her keep her alive. She laments what a terrible mother she was, how she never even got to hold Sephiroth after his birth. Lately, she's been dreaming about him a lot. She heard about his supposed death 5 years ago, and asked Vincent if her son is still alive. To spare her the pain of knowing what her son has become, Vincent lies and says that yeah, he's dead. The scene fades to black, and when we return to the cave, Lucretia is gone. But she leaves something for Vincent, his ultimate weapon, Death Penalty, and his level 4 limit break, Chaos. Like I said when he joined the party, I feel so bad for Vincent. He easily has the most interesting backstory of any party member, who isn't part of the main trio of Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith, but this is all we get to flesh out his story, and it's completely optional. I know the quality of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII is pretty spotty, but I'm glad Dirge of Cerberus gave poor Vincent the spotlight. I barely remember much about the game, but maybe I can replay it for the channel soon? Alright, you only have a couple side quests to go. First, Chocobo breeding. There are 4 locations on the map that are completely unreachable by the Highwind or any other vehicle, so the only way to explore them is through the help of the right type of Chocobo. Outside of the standard yellow Chocobo, there's the blue Chocobo, which can cross shallow water like the tiny Bronco. There's the green Chocobo, which can cross over mountains, the black Chocobo, which can cross both, and finally the gold Chocobo, which can traverse all terrain types, including the ocean. I'll try to keep this as concise as possible, because this video is long enough as it is, and avoid turning it into a full guide on how to get each Chocobo type. To start Chocobo breeding, return to the farm and speak to Billy to buy stables for the wild Chocobos you capture. You can purchase a maximum of 6 stables, each costing 10,000 gil. The whole Chocobo breeding process can be a bit steep, so you might want to sell some maxed out materia to cover the cost. Once you have the stables, head to the northern continent and visit the isolated home of the Chocobo Sage. The Chocobo Sage sells better greens that make it easier to catch Chocobos and raise their stats. From there, you'll need to go out and catch the right type of Chocobos to start the breeding process. There are 8 different types of chocobo with individual stats varying depending on which type you capture. You'll need a good and great chocobo, but you're better off capturing 2 great chocobos, which can be found around the tracks near Midgar. Billy will tell you what type you've captured when you speak to him at the farm. To avoid reloading until you get what you want, look for an enemy encounter that includes a single chocobo and a single enemy called a spiral. Once you've caught a chocobo, you can either take it back to the Highwind or send it off to the farm. At the farm, any new chocobos you capture will be kept outside. When you speak to Billy, you'll see the gender of your chocobo and can move them into a stall in the barn. Save outside the farm before talking to Billy, then reload until you get a chocobo of each gender. Speak to Billy's sister Chloe and she'll tell you which chocobo has the best stats. Then feed that chocobo 10 skillless greens, bought from the chocobo stage, to increase its stats. Now head to the gold saucer, participate in the chocobo races, and win at least 4 races with that one chocobo. Go back to the farm, tell Billy you want to breed your 2 chocobos, and feed them a carob nut, which you can obtain by stealing it from a monster called Blacarados near the Bone Village. After your feathery friends get busy, either a blue or green chocobo will be born. Then get into 10 battles, save, and breed your chocobos again until you get the opposite color and gender of the first chocobo born. From there, you'll repeat the process of feeding one of your new chocobos greens to raise its stats, have it win more races at the saucer, and then breed it with its sibling to get the black chocobo. Then do this whole process again with the black chocobo, capture a wonderful chocobo near the tracks on the northern continent, breed them together, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you got a gold chocobo. While the chocobo breeding could be a bit tedious, even with a guide, it does feel like a rewarding experience once you've earned that glorious golden bird. Honestly, I feel like the game should have introduced it earlier when you needed to cross the swamp to avoid the Midgar Zolom. That way the chocobos could have replaced the buggy and tiny bronco, as the green, blue, and black chocobos all do the same thing, so they kind of feel redundant to obtain after Disc 1, and only really serve as a means to an end to get the gold chocobo. But now that we got our golden chicken, we can visit the 4 Materia caves which each contain a powerful materia, including Quadra Magic, Mime, HP to MP, and finally the most powerful summon of the game, Knights of the Round, which will trivialize just about everything you encounter with one summon. Well, all except the game's 2 super bosses. This brings us to the last major side quest, the Calm Traveler and the remaining weapons. When you head to Calm and enter this house, a guy on the 2nd floor tells you how he wants to see the world, and travel before a meteor reduces the planet to space dust. He asks for 3 items before he leaves, a guidebook, a desert rose, and an earth harp. To get the guidebook, you need to return to Junon and take the elevator down to the underwater tunnel. Once there, run around until you encounter the ghost ship. You need to kill it using the morph spell to transform it into the guidebook. Since morph does a pitiful amount of damage, the best way to pull it off is to equip Yuffie with the conformer, and have her use morph, as it'll deal a lot more damage. Give the traveler to the guidebook, and he'll reward you with the underwater materia, which allows you to breathe underwater while it's equipped. Next up is the earth harp, which drops from the first of 2 super bosses, the Emerald Weapon. Use the Shinra sub to reach the ocean floor and start searching for something that looks like a huge green mech. That's the Emerald Weapon. This is where the underwater materia comes in handy, as normally you're on a 20-minute timer to fight it, but the materia removes that restriction. I'm not going to delve into the specifics of this behemoth's stats and abilities, but you want to fight it when you're at a high level, somewhere in the 70s or 80s, and equipped it with the best weapons, armor, and materia like Knights of the Round, and limit breaks like Omnislash. The Emerald Weapon has a beefy 1 million HP, and its combination of attacks can decimate your party almost immediately if you're not properly prepared. There's various strategies to take it down, from using W Summon and Mime to hit it with Knights of the Round several times in a row, to doing something similar with Cloud's Omnislash. But however you do it, when it dies, you'll get the Earth Harp, which you can give to the Calm Traveler in exchange for a Master Command Materia, Master Magic Materia, and Master Summon Materia. Each of these materia gives you access to every spell in that particular materia type. Finally, to get the Desert Rose, you have to defeat the most powerful boss in the game, Ruby Weapon, who's hanging out just outside the Gold Saucer. Despite having less HP than Emerald Weapon, it has high defenses, powerful spells, and 2 tentacles that serve as support, countering your attacks by casting gravity magic and status effects. Worst of all, it can remove members of your party from battle with its Whirl Sand ability. Like Emerald, you want to challenge Ruby when you're at a high level, with high stats, the best equipment, and the best spells. Additionally, start the battle with 2 of your party members already knocked out to avoid it using World Sand. Then revive them when it places its tentacles into the ground. Ruby can still use World Sand after a certain number of turns, so you need to defeat it quickly or inflict paralysis using spells or an item called Dazer. Unlike Emerald, defeating Ruby Weapon is more of a bragging rights reward, as taking the Desert Rose to the Calm Traveler, you'll just end up getting a gold chocobo, which is kinda pointless since you already have one. Alrighty, I think that's everything. Let's mosey to the Northern Cave and kick Sephiroth's ass. So I'll be honest, the Northern Cave as a final dungeon is pretty lackluster. Sure, it has some pretty powerful enemies, assuming you didn't do all the side quests I just mentioned, or level grinded. Some areas have a confusing layout to traverse to proceed, and it's the only place where you have to manually place a save crystal, instead of using a pre-existing one. So you have to use your noggin on deciding where the best place to put it is so you don't lose too much progress if your party wipes, or so it doesn't take too long to leave the cave if you want. Of course, that's assuming you don't accidentally trigger the save crystal glitch and ruin your save file. Best practice is to either not use it, or use it around here when regrouping with the party, and, making multiple saves. But yeah, as a dungeon, it just doesn't feel that grand, and like we're building up to the final confrontation with Sephiroth. I think it's mainly the lack of mid-bosses or enemy NPCs to confront before the final boss. There's not much that makes it feel different from the other dungeons outside of the unique enemies in a section where the party splits up, in order to cover more ground and reunite to drop off items they found. The optional Ancient Forest feels like it had more thought put into its design than this place does, but oh well. Reaching the bottom of the cave, the party will sense Sephiroth near the center of the planet. You're given one last chance to choose your party for the final battle, and whoever you don't pick will stay up above to fight an unseen enemy threat. Below, you'll first be challenged by what remains of Jenova Synthesis, which I flattened pretty easy thanks to Knights of the Round. Now, while this fight honestly isn't too special, assuming you didn't come in seriously underleveled, how the fight goes will determine a few things in the next couple of fights. After Jenova is eradicated once and for all, the group confronts Sephiroth, who's now more powerful than ever. Using his awesome psychic power, or ki, I'm not sure, he'll fling the party around without saying a word or acknowledging their presence. The specifics of this final fight depend on several factors. How fast you beat Jenova Synthesis, the average level of your party, whether you picked up Yuffie and Vincent, and whether you used Knights of the Round. These factors determine whether you'll fight Sephiroth with 1, 2, or 3 different parties, requiring you to divide your materia and equipment accordingly. Using Knights of the Round will also increase the HP of both of Sephiroth's forms, and I believe being at level 99 has the same effect. Whatever your party layout, Sephiroth transforms into Bizarro Sephiroth. If you have multiple parties, the other two will need to destroy his arms first before the main party can attack his core. In my case, I only went with one party, so I could fight Bizarro Sephiroth without any restrictions. Once that form is defeated, the next phase begins immediately, as the iconic One-Winged Angel plays. Saber Sephiroth descends to fight the party. Unfortunately, my team was so overpowered at this point that even Sephiroth's ultimate move, Supernova, wasn't much of a threat. But man, I just love to sit back and watch this ridiculously long animation of a meteor smashing through all the planets in the solar system. It's so over the top and ridiculous. I bet those equations probably mean something. After winning the fight and watching Saber Sephiroth disintegrate into nothing, we're still not done. There's still a lingering part of Sephiroth dwelling inside Cloud, so we get a one-on-one duel between the two inside Cloud's mind. Hey Cloud, why is the Sephiroth inside your head shirtless? When was he ever shirtless? Is this some sort of symbolism my dumb brain doesn't understand? Or is there something you need to tell me, Cloud? This is just a scripted battle, by the way. Cloud can't be killed and the fight ends as soon as he uses Omnislash. Most likely, they couldn't do a full FMB of the two fighting, so they went with a quick battle to showcase how strong Cloud has become, and to emphasize that Sephiroth will never control him again. After the fight, the remaining remnants of Sephiroth dissolve into the life stream. Cloud wakes up as the cave begins collapsing, and he'll grab Tifa as she reaches out to him. Wow, those are bouncy. And then they'll regroup with the others. With Sephiroth gone, Holy is on its way, but the party won't be able to escape the cave and avoid getting caught in its energy. Well, that is until the high wind conveniently comes crashing down below. The party hops on and flies out of there just as Holy bursts out of the planet. The scene shifts to Marlene and Calm, suddenly sensing Aerith as she looks out the window, just as Meteor is about to touch down on Midgar. Holy arrives in time to form a barrier above the city, but its power isn't enough. Meteor is still pushing through. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, the life stream begins to burst from different spots around the world, converging on Midgar to assist in stopping Meteor. A white flash envelops the city and the party, with a brief glimpse of an old friend, before everything suddenly cuts to black and the game ends. After the credits, the game skips ahead 500 years, showing an older Red 13 with his 2 cubs running through the area. Huh, guess he wasn't the last of his kind after all. As the trio reach a cliffside, the final shot of the game is of Midgar, desolated and now covered in plant life. And that was Final Fantasy VII. Man, I completely forgot that's how the game originally ended. Okay, so I'm just gonna come out and say it, but Final Fantasy VII's ending isn't great. Let's rewind things a bit and go back to the final fight with Sephiroth. For a guy who spent the entire game tormenting Cloud, claiming he was unstoppable, and oh yeah, killing Aerith, it's weird that when we finally confront him for the final time, he doesn't say anything. Sephiroth killed the one person capable of messing up his plan, is strong enough to stop the spell she gave her life for, and successfully summoned Meteor. Sephiroth should be over the moon in those final moments, gloating about how he won. He could have had a good chuckle, rubbed it in Cloud's face, maybe even told the party that it was futile to fight him. He could have pulled a Wesker and told them they only had 7 minutes to play, before throwing them into a time battle against him, and if they didn't take him down fast enough, Meteor would hit the planet, and it would be game over. A real, the future refused to change kind of moment. I guess I just wanted a little more from him in the end. Not a full-blown breakdown where he screams that a failure like Cloud could never beat him, but something that felt more satisfying. But then again, maybe even though he lost, he could have reveled in the fact that Meteor was still on track to decimate the planet. My guess is that the final FMV and the Omni-Slash fight were supposed to be where the developers wanted the pair to have their final verbal exchange before Cloud settled the score. However, a combination of needing to cut content to launch the game and possibly some technical limitations might have prevented them from fully realizing that vision. Also, another thing that didn't quite sit right with me was the way the game ended just as Meteor was about to hit. The game already set up the question of whether Holy might wipe out humanity along with Meteor, Sephiroth, and Jenova, creating this ambiguity about whether humanity was deemed worthy to continue. But it just felt too abrupt for my liking. Considering the party went through all that effort to stop that asshole Sephiroth from destroying the planet, it would really suck if they ended up dying anyway. I'm not saying the game needed a long epilogue showing Barrett going home to Marlene, Sid apologizing and proposing to Shira, Vincent going back to sleep or inventing a cereal or something, but honestly I would have preferred to see it end with Holy and the livestream eradicating Meteor. The party could have looked on in awe as the livestream painted a green aura across the sky, the camera shifting to the stars above, ending the game the way it began. Even though I didn't love the ambiguity of the ending, I think I understand what the developers were going for with that time jump and the shot of Midgar. It ties back to Final Fantasy VII's theme of life, that even after humanity's gone, nature, and by extension the planet, will still go on. They kinda end up screwing up what they were going for thanks to Dirge of Cerberus and Advent Children, but hey, whatever, at least we got a more conclusive end for our characters. Aside from the ending, my other main issue is with the rest of the party. Final Fantasy VII's director Yoshinori Kitase mentioned that while Final Fantasy VI was an ensemble piece where any character could be the main character, they intentionally made Final Fantasy VII Cloud's story, with him as the main character. And honestly, it works great for him. I love that Cloud is the subversion of the typical hero, with his struggles with mental health and his journey to find his true self. Tifa, Aerith, and to a certain extent Barrett are key players in his story, but the rest of the party? They're not as well fleshed out and often feel like they're just there to fill space. It doesn't help that half of your party is usually missing during major story beats, so you only get someone's perspective if they're in your active party, with Vincent being the most tragic case. Like I mentioned earlier, he got shafted the most due to cuts in the game, yet his story ties pretty good into Sephiroth's. The others lack a strong connection to Cloud, his vendetta against Sephiroth, and the overarching goal of saving the planet. They're kind of just along for the ride. Sid gets some focus toward the end of Disc 2, but even then he's mostly just tagging along. That's why I've enjoyed parts of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII and the remake trilogy. Sure, they have their flaws, but they've done a lot to expand the characterization of the party members. Still, Final Fantasy VII is a damn good game, and I'd still call it a masterpiece. I wouldn't say it's my favorite RPG on the PS1. That title goes to Breath of Fire 4, for so many reasons I can't get into in this video. And I can't call it my favorite Final Fantasy on the PS1 either. mainly because I still haven't finished 8 or 9. That said, something is seriously clicking with me about Final Fantasy IX, and I think it's going to upend a lot of opinions I have about the other games in the series. But even if it's not my favorite or the best in the series, I can't deny that Final Fantasy VII is the most important game in the franchise. It was a technical marvel at the time of its release, with a cinematic approach that, combined with its visuals, allowed for a more ambitious narrative. It abandoned the traditional medieval fantasy setting of most RPGs for a more modern and semi-realistic world. It explored themes of mental health, corporate greed, and environmentalism, issues that resonate even more now, almost 30 years after the game's release. Its hectic development pushed Square to change their approach to creating new titles, moving from a more lax, throw-it-at-the-wall style to something more rigid and structured. Though, of course, their ambitions eventually started to outweigh what they were capable of. Insert whatever Final Fantasy example after 10 you want here, or, Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. Most importantly, all these factors combined with an aggressive marketing campaign helped the series and JRPGs in general transition from a niche genre to something with a much broader appeal here in the West. Revisiting Final Fantasy VII for this video has given me a new appreciation for everything it achieved, and how it succeeded despite its flaws. And despite how long this video turned out, how far I fell behind in getting it done, and how drained I am after the fact, I would love to come back to check out its various spin-offs, prequels, remake and rebirth, and of course, the other games in the Final Fantasy series.
So, how do you like my swimming?
And that's the video. Thanks for watching, guys. And special thanks to my Tier 2 channel members and patrons, whose names are up on screen right now. And special thanks to my Tier 3 channel members and patrons, including Alfred Correa, Augie Doggy, Chicken D Samurai, Miles Garrett, Primary, Skillfuse, and Reckless Nerd. I'm going to skip the longer Patreon/channel membership sales pitch, but check out the links below if you want to support the channel. Oof, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I really shit the bed when it came to getting this video done. I knew exactly what I was walking into, and the amount of work required. I planned ahead and started laying the groundwork for it all the way back at the end of December. But just like my GTA 5 video last year, I fumbled the ball, and this took considerably more time and effort than it really should have for me. And it screwed up my release schedule on top of it. Fingers crossed all that hard work pays off like it did with that video. But just like last year, this video on Final Fantasy VII has completely drained me. So I'm going to take a break to recharge, and start reevaluating my approach to these bigger projects. Still, I am hoping to continue covering more Final Fantasy games in the future, as there is just so much I want to talk about with this franchise, and other RPG franchises in general, especially Breath of Fire. It won't replace my normal content, but maybe like one Final Fantasy video or RPG video a month or 2 months in between my usual stuff. Speaking of which, the next big video is on Mafia 3. Due to my schedule slip, I might do something smaller first though. We'll see how it goes and how I feel after my break. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you. And if you're new to my channel and want to see me continue covering this series, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. With the holidays on the horizon, I'm hoping the channel will get its usual bump in growth, and we can make it to 100k subscribers by the end of the year. Going to cut it short, my voice is already long gone at this point. I might stream again, so keep an eye on the community tab. I'm FuzzySlippers, and I'll see you later. Peace.